Hello. I'd like to thank everyone for joining me here today. Now, this is something I've wanted to do for a very long time. Just sit down and have a big long podcast style video just recounting all of the crazy things I've done. And we just recently on J-Co-Urbex hit 10,000 subscribers, so now is the perfect occasion to finally do that. Needless to say, I've done a lot of things between when I started in 2019 and now where we are here at 10K subs in 2025. So in order from start to finish, every major event, all the drama, all the spilled tea, all the lore, everything I've ever done, all in order, right here in one show. Let's get it. Now, my beginning on the Explore scene and the Explore YouTube scene comes all the way back in 2019, really early 2019. In fact, you could say it goes even deeper than that, into like 2018, 17, 16, 15. I wasn't exploring back then, but I was kind of setting the groundwork for it in something else I was doing, which was going out and catching snakes. That was the big thing that I was into before it was exploring. It was going out and just hunting for wild snakes and catching them. So obviously, sometimes it'd be kind of hard to do that without, needing some new lands to go to, and didn't exactly want to trespass back then, so I was always kind of looking for little loopholes. And then suddenly, by around 2018 or 19, I was starting to wonder, well, what about abandoned property? What if abandoned property was kind of a decent little loophole for me to go and do that in a way where trespassing didn't really matter as much? And so that kind of started to get the wheels in my head spinning as far as trying to hunt for abandoned or neglected properties to kind of go rooting around. Only back then it was for the purpose of finding snakes. So the groundwork for that was already being laid in my brain long before the YouTube channel became a thing. But then something else happened which really spun it into motion. It was really early 2019. I think I might have been on winter break or something for school. I remember just lounging around home, just laying in bed all day, watching YouTube, and then I discovered a couple of YouTube channels that back then were kind of based around Urbex, or at least the things they were doing in the videos are based on Urbex. It was channels like TFIL and old Sam and Colby channels, and I remember just laying in bed, just bored, nothing else to do, and I was just watching all these. Hours would go by. I'm talking like hours. It'd be sunny outside, and then I'd look up and suddenly it was nightfall because I'd spent like 3-4 straight hours just binge watching all those videos, like start to end. And it was just one of those moments where like you suddenly get so inspired. It's one of those rare things where something you're just getting vicarious entertainment from inspires you so much that you want to go out and like experience it yourself. And that was like the exact moment I realized, man, I really do want to go to these like abandoned properties, but I don't just want to root around for snakes. I want to actually explore. Like I want to actually go see some crazy cool stuff. And so I already had a YouTube channel, but I wanted to like branch out and start doing this explore stuff too on it. And so I just kind of did. I remember going back to college shortly after all that. Still, I was watching all those videos, and again being in my dorm room and plotting out how I'm going to do all this. Like, how am I going to find abandoned places? What am I going to do? I'm down in Springfield, Missouri, because that's where I go to college. Like, I want to start doing this stuff. Like, how do I get started? Still to this day, I think it's like a cruel twist of irony. But right as I was beginning to start looking around myself for abandoned places, that's when all those Sam and Colby videos kind of ended because they themselves got arrested, which I would end up having my own run-in with that, but we'll get to that a little later. So imagine what a bummer it was when this thing that I just found, that I'd been so inspired by, I wanted to go out and experience that for myself, suddenly was over. Like, they weren't posting those videos anymore, and I was like, man, guess it's up to me now. But I was really committed to this. I really wanted to do this. So January 27th, 2019 marked the first day I ever went to an abandoned place. It was just this rundown old house in some really like deteriorated, crumbling neighborhood right outside Springfield, Missouri. And I actually filmed a video at this place basically announcing that I'd be doing that kind of thing, which in retrospect, thinking about it now, it was actually really like kind of ballsy, but kind of dumb at the same time. Like my first ever experience at an abandoned place was me announcing that I'd be going to a bunch of other abandoned places. Like that was the test run, the announcement. So lo and behold, I went to at least another abandoned like house or two. I did like a couple little mini test runs. And then sure enough, eventually I went to what is the first video posted to this channel, or the J-Co-Urbex channel. This is just the backup channel. But exploring abandoned rural houses. That was right outside, again, Springfield, Missouri. And that marked the first abandoned place video that I ever did. And that was really early February. Now here's a fun fact I may have mentioned on maybe Instagram or something, but y'all would have never known. The abandoned mill, one of the abandoned grain elevators in Springfield, Missouri that I ended up filming as like my 13th or 14th one. That was gonna be the first ever one. I went to that one before I went to those houses, and I wanted that one to be the first one I ever did, and I still to this day think that would have been a really hard in a good way, like a really tough place to have done for my very first one ever. But I didn't want to climb the ladder. I remember my mother or my parents had told me, don't be climbing stuff, so I didn't back then. Nowadays I climb everything, but back then I didn't want to climb it, so it was the houses instead. But in retrospect, I think that was kind of a smart thing. I started small and kind of slowly leveled up. So I went to a couple houses in that first video. I went to the albino farm, which is just kind of like an urban legend everyone around Springfield knew of back then. Then I went to another grain elevator. This one was a different one, only I still didn't climb. I just explored the bottom levels. Then I leveled up to kind of like a warehouse type of place. Then I did like a kind of couple smaller places like warehouse or kind of gutted hospital kind of things before I really started hitting like bigger buildings. And still to this day, that's one of my biggest tips for new explorers. If they ask me, I'm like, start small and then kind of level up. Don't go sneaking into some crazy massive hospital as like your first ever place. Like start small. But it was kind of off to the races from there. I had this old channel and I was just kind of posting every now and then on it. Between when I was in college in Springfield, because this was 2020, I was like a sophomore then, and then KC when I was home, just kind of not at school. The two places aren't that far apart, so I spent a lot of time around both. So all those, what I call the pilot episodes that were on my old channel that I re-uploaded to the J-Co-Urb channel, were kind of like the beginning. There was like 17 or 18 or 16 or something that I filmed on that channel back then, and that was my beginning. But eventually I decided that I didn't just want to be doing this explore stuff kind of around the other videos I was already filming on that old channel, like the snake stuff, the occasional bowling video, other things like that. I really liked this exploring thing, so I wanted to create an actual channel dedicated to only that. So on February 20th, 2020, this channel, J-Co-Urbex, was born. I sat in my sophomore year dorm room up at Drury University in Springfield, Missouri, and I created J-Co-Urbex. And I reposted all the initial like 16, 17, 18 ones I'd done onto that new channel, and started posting on J-Co-Urbex from that point on, when it was abandoned stuff. And that kind of ushers us into like our first era, as I call them, which was the Kansas City era. Now, we all know what was going on around 2020 at that time. It was early in the year. I just made the channel in February, and COVID was becoming a big thing. And COVID ended up shutting down my school and forcing everything to go online for like the better part of the second half of the year, at least from March, April, and May up until that year ended. Suddenly I went from being down in Springfield at school, kind of hunting around for these abandoned places, to back at home, where I had Kansas City at my full disposal and nothing but time on my hands because all my classes were suddenly online. I just made the channel, I was back at home, and I had a bunch of free time. So I got on Google Maps, started finding all these abandoned places around KC, and it was, again, off to the races. Only this time, now that I had the new channel, I really wanted to like dedicate myself to it, and I wanted to post a video every single week. I wanted to have a really consistent post schedule where every week I'd have a video ready to go of a new abandoned place. And this is also when the new videos started to have like a more consistent format, They were of similar lengths. They were of places that were big enough to be worth filming. So some of those initial pilot episodes were like of smaller places or places that were like, or videos that were really short. I developed a more kind of standard format for the channel at this point when I was back at home doing Kansas City. And here's a little tidbit of crazy irony. The first video I ever, at least the first full-length video that wasn't like a mini thing that I ever did for the J-Co-Urbex channel was the abandoned Wichita factory, which we'll get to later, what ends up happening there when I go back. But otherwise, the next video I filmed, which started like the Kansas City era, was me going to that old factory, which unfortunately no longer exists. It got torn down, but it was like, I think I titled it the Sam and Colby Factory. And that was me exploring that, and that was like my first video in Kansas City to be put on the J-Co-Urb channel. And so there's actually a snippet of footage from in there where I make like a welcome to the channel trailer, which I ended up making it at an abandoned house later on and posting that. But I filmed one of those at that factory and basically described everything I just told you, how this channel's new. I'm going to post every single week. Every week there's going to be a new abandoned place and it's going to be great. And then the next week after that, for the first time ever, I filmed 2 videos in the same day. One at John K. Stark School and one at Trinity Lutheran Hospital, which was a highly famous, well-known abandoned Kansas City place. Again, unfortunately, both of those places have been torn down. They don't exist anymore, which is really sad, but I just remember filming both of those in one day and just thinking in my mind, wow, this is great. Like, I'm really doing it. Like, I'm doing the whole YouTuber thing. I'm ahead of it. I'm filming videos. I'm getting stuff done. And I remember exiting that hospital, and that was kind of like a crazy video. I hadn't had anything like that happen to me back then. I got lost down in the basement of it. I just remember thinking, man, this is the start of something big. Like, even back then in 2020, I was like, man, this could be something special. Like, this is like a passion of mine that's developing right before me. I was a college student. I was doing online courses. It was really boring. I was just at home, so I was like trying to find something to really cling on to. It was like the big thing, the next big thing that's going to take over my life. I didn't know what direction my life was going in, but I knew it was going to be this from that moment on. Basically, after that day, that was a big day. Right then and there, the channel became my prized possession. I edited that school video and I had that ready to go like days before Sunday. I couldn't wait to post it. And then I did the same with the hospital, and those were the moments that the channel suddenly just became like my prized possession. Make a long story short, all of that summer, that spring and summer, I just started filming all over Kansas City. A couple notable ones were Robeson Middle School. That place nowadays became like one of my hideouts. I know a few years after I filmed that one, I started going to that one all the time. It became one of the few places I actually went back to on a regular basis just to hang out and chill off camera, just because it was a chill, safe spot. The first time I ever met up with people was at that abandoned juvenile center. I still remember their names, Dylan and Audrey. I haven't kept up with them at all. I haven't heard from them or spoken to them since that summer in 2020. I hope they're doing well. But that was the first time anyone had ever like gone out of their way to hit me up and try to like contact me through like email or whatever it was. I didn't even have Instagram back then. I just had email. That was the first time anyone had ever hit me up to like try to explore with them. And I said, sure, why not? And that was my first time ever meeting up with people to film that juvenile center. I still remember at that point, I think my channel had either close to or just barely over 100 subscribers. But yeah, I do still have like fond memories of just going all over Kansas City that summer and just filming all these places, kind of settling into the process of it, the way I want videos to look, how they're supposed to feel, at least how they were back then. It's sad to say a lot of those places that I filmed that summer just don't exist anymore. Only a handful of them, I think, are still there or still in any sort of state that they were when I filmed them. A lot of them either got repurposed or just torn down entirely. But we'll skip ahead to the end of summer. That's how my summer looked, filming KC, new video every week, and I was loving the process. But then suddenly school was going to be back in session. It was August at that point. COVID was still, happening, but school was still going to meet in person again anyway. It was a new year. I was about to be a junior. It was 2021. And so I drove, before I drove back down to Springfield, I remember going to KC one more time and filming 3 of them in one day. I mean, one of them was kind of like a mini episode because I set off alarms at that college, but then I went to like the Workhouse Castle, everyone knows that one in KC, and then this other like big warehouse off in KCK. And so that was like the first time I ever filmed 3 in a day, just so I could prepare to get accustomed back to school. So I kind of had the channel covered for a few weeks. And then I moved back to Springfield, and that's kind of where we segue into what I call our like Springfield, Joplin, kind of Missouri type of era. Now the Kansas City era as it was and the Springfield era kind of overlap because I was still kind of to and from school and college at times. So if I was in KC, I'd film a KC video. If I was in Springfield or Joplin area, I'd go over and film one around there if I could. But otherwise, all I can tell you is I was back in college and I was still trying to film videos weekly. Every now and then I had to miss a week just because there wasn't anything I could film around there at the time or I was too busy. I was going through a rough patch at that time. Between the end of summer and that fall when I went back to school, your boy suffered kind of a little bit of a heartbreak. It's kind of, I feel kind of silly looking back on it now because it was kind of like, not the biggest deal, but I made it a big deal back then. There was this girl that I really liked. I bowled with her. We had like mutual bowling friends and we went out on like a date. I guess it wasn't really a date, but it was exactly like a date. And I really liked her, but I didn't really know how to say it. And then eventually she got with someone else and that kind of broke my heart there. We'd only hung out like for a few weeks or so back then. Like we'd gotten close and then we hung out. We talked all the time. It was like a talking stage turned hangout. And then suddenly it was all over and she was with someone else. And that really hurt me back then. Looking back on it now, I've been through way worse than that. But back then that was a big canon event in my life. And I was really upset. I was just a zombie laying around my college dorm. I was upset all the time. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't have friends down there. Like I had my bowling teammates, but I didn't really hang out with anyone. I was kind of like a loner. And eventually that gave me even more motivation to just really make the channel like my life's purpose. I took all the bad stuff I was feeling then in my personal life and I took it upon myself to really go hard at the channel because that was like my passion. And so I took all that negativity, that sadness I was feeling, and I kind of channeled it into motivation for the YouTube channel because I was like, that's my key to being happy. That's my ticket to like a really cool, amazing life to live. And that motivated me even more. So what that kind of culminated into was a particular video. All that stuff I was going through and feeling at the time, I wanted to translate it into this big, crazy, epic video. And that's when I filmed at that big grain elevator again. And still to this day, I think that's one of the most epic thumbnails I've ever made. But I went back to that Aurora one down in Missouri, the one I'd filmed my 3rd ever video at. And this time I committed to climbing up the ladder and going and seeing the top. Despite the fact that I saw workers over on one end of it, I was like, no, this is happening. We're making this happen. I remember back then that was like one of the best videos I'd ever done, I felt like. Just the meaning behind it and just the overall adventure that was like, for what I'd done already at that point, that video was like one of my peak videos. The timing on all this is kind of hazy. I remember that may have come first, that may have come second, but around the same time, it was October of 2020. I also had my first ever really close encounter with getting caught in some serious trouble. And most of y'all know this one, but it was almost caught at closed down vacant college. And I waited like almost a year. I waited like 8 months to post that video, but that happened in October, shortly in this kind of time period I'm talking about down in Springfield. And that was like a momentous thing because that was my first like really close encounter with getting into trouble doing this kind of thing. That had me shook for a while, but in the end I made it out and I just had a banger video out of it. It was not too long after that again I had people reach out to me, and it was some Springfield locals. It was at this point in late 2020, kind of around that fall winter time, that I met up with Emily, Kelly, and Phoenix. Emily and Kelly hit me up one day and asked me just to help them film something, and I said sure. That was the day I met them. And then I met Phoenix for the first time ever the day I filmed at that massive, massive untouched hospital We drove all the way out to that place, me and Emily, and that was the day I met Phoenix, and we filmed that hospital. And that place was so big and grand that I decided I was going to sit on that footage and I was going to make that the very first ever video of 2021 as we entered a new year. I would later go on to film a little quick 3-video stint in Branson with Emily. She brought that up when I was talking about going down and doing that, because Branson was down around that Springfield Joplin range. All that area used to have a lot of pretty good abandoned places back then around this 2020 time. So I went down and did that. That was my infamous hitting my head on some concrete at an abandoned hotel and bleeding everywhere video. And then I still am proud of this to this day. Even with that gaping wound still in my head, just because the bleeding had stopped, we went right on and filmed 2 more. So in those other 2 videos, nobody really knows, but there's a big gash in my head that's still there. But again, I'd film like 3 in a day. That kind of covered the channel for virtually the rest of the year at that point. We filmed those back in like November. Shortly after that, I was back in KC. It might have been a winter break there, or I might have just been at home on a weekend. I don't know, but did like another quick little KC stint with a couple videos. And that was when I filmed this giant high school. It's called Westport High School. It's one of those ones that has since been turned into a functioning apartment place, so it's not even abandoned anymore. But oh, that was my first ever like experience with like having a video just suddenly like get a ton of views. And the cool story behind that was that when I posted that video of that insane high school and that crazy auditorium, some old alumni that went to that school found that and posted it to the Facebook page that, since it was such a historic school, had like thousands upon thousands of people following. So I posted that video, and that was already one of the most insanely cool places I'd ever gotten into. It was out of sheer luck because I found an open door somehow because the renovation team working on it didn't lock it. But suddenly I posted that, and in a day or 2, the thing had jumped up to like multi-thousand views. I couldn't believe it. I was like, whoa. That was like my first encounter really seeing a video just pop off like that. Anyway, by this point, the year is 2021. It's really early in the year. It's like January, February. But this is the time when me and Phoenix became like really close. He became like my best pal in the world. It still kills me to this day that there's only one video on this channel, in this entire channel's history back then, there's only one video where me and Phoenix just tackle an abandoned place, just the 2 of us together, and it's Container Tank Factory. That one was in like Joplin or somewhere near there. And still to this day, that's one of like my most sentimental favorite videos. Nobody has really watched it. It doesn't have a lot of views on it, but that's one of my absolute favorite videos. I'm telling you, me and Phoenix, despite the lack of like actual content between us, would go out like almost on the weekly around Springfield and just get into crazy mischief. We'd try to climb stuff. We'd go to like little abandoned places. This would all be off camera, but we filmed an entire podcast just like I'm doing now, just talking about these crazy encounters we had at one point. And man, those were just some of the heydays. Like none of this is even filmed, but I remember those times like vividly sometimes. Like it felt good to have like a crazy like cool pal to go do this stuff with, who was like capable of doing the same things as me, shared like a similar sense of humor, like bonded over like experiences and stories and everything, and those were some special times. Now honestly, life stuff kind of got in the way eventually. Phoenix went on to join the Air Guard or Air Force, whichever one he called it, and he had to like go off to like a training camp thing eventually. But I truly like to believe that in an alternate universe, an alternate dimension, if our like personal lives had been able to stay as close like that, I would love to imagine in another world this channel became like a full-time Jared and Phoenix show where it was like the 2 of us like traveling the country and going to abandoned places. I think those videos would have been absolutely fire, and I think that would have been some of the most fun times ever of my life. But yeah, obviously things happen. Things end up happening to me, which we're getting to soon. He had his own stuff going on, so we definitely talked about stuff like that. We talked about taking these wild, crazy trips, but those just didn't end up happening. Hey, maybe I'll hit him up again. Maybe he'll want to. Phoenix also introduced me to Caden. Caden is another one that it sucks that there was only ever one video back then that he was in, and that was going down to Close Down College Part 2. Yeah, I know, I almost got caught there, but then we went back again. But that's the one and only video Caden's in, and Again, that just kind of sucks that we never got him into any more, but between meeting Emily and Kelly, filming with them, meeting Phoenix, filming with him, there was kind of like a circle that was getting built around there, like us and like our friends or their friends. I didn't have any friends down there. I wasn't from there, but me meeting them and kind of their friends, and like the circle started to like expand. And then suddenly it kind of became like a regular thing for some of them to be in the videos. Like, I remember we went to Joplin on a couple occasions to try to film some videos. I know there's at least 3 out there with kind of like that kind of group, or at least some of the older members of it, like Phoenix, Kelly, Emily. Remember there was one night we went over to Joplin and we filmed like 2 of them. One of them was at this really cool old-timey school. That video was a pretty good time. And then we went to this Holiday Inn where we almost got caught by like a bunch of cops. I know, unfortunately, I didn't get that on film because we were driving away having already filmed the video, but as we drove back by it, we saw the place surrounded by cops because the kids who were dumb enough to bring a gun with them and shine flashlights from up the roof next to a highway got cops called on them, and that was almost us because we were leaving as soon as they were coming in. That was kind of another one of those kind of chilling, almost got caught or arrested stories. Otherwise, it kind of became a regular thing for them to be in the videos with me. I don't know. I don't really remember how it happened. It just kind of did. I remember thinking I kind of liked filming the videos on my own, but having them there kind of made it like a fun vibe, even though it made editing kind of hard to still make a coherent video. But that early 21 stretch where it was kind of me and them kind of vicariously, whenever we could, going to abandoned places and filming the videos, it was a pretty good time. Those are some pretty good memories. But now, at this point in our tale, it's up to about March. It's about March 2021, and I'm on spring break. I was on spring break from college, and kind of winding back to what I'd said earlier about kind of going through a rough patch in life with like my head and my heart being hurt back then, and trying to take the channel and making it really special even more than it already was. I decided that I wanted to do something really big back then if I ever had the time. I wanted to take like a big multi-day road trip to somewhere far away and film a bunch of videos in like a brand new place all at the same time and cover a bunch of weeks worth on the channel just to see what that would be like. And so spring break 2021, I had like 3 or 4 days to work with, and that's what I used that for. And what that was ended up being the Oklahoma trip. I remember I'd recently made an Instagram back then. I don't know if I had more than like 50 or 100 followers on it, but I did a poll on that Instagram. Where would you want to see me take a trip? And the options were Oklahoma or Arkansas, and Oklahoma won. So that's why it was Oklahoma. I know I knew of a lot of abandoned places because I'd mapped them out for this trip around Tulsa and OKC and kind of various towns in between. So I had the spots. I just needed to go out and see if I could actually do it, get it done. What would that look like? Just filming them all at once in a road trip setting, like just winging it. Like, I wanted to know what that would be like. So the biggest takeaway I can say about the Oklahoma trip, which some of it is aged like milk, others of it have aged pretty well, but the biggest takeaway I can tell you about Oklahoma was like, it was like the test run, the blueprint of what this channel would eventually turn into in like 2023, 4, and even now, like just taking crazy multi-day travel trips. That was like the blueprint. Like, when I think of traveling around to film abandoned places, I think of like the year 2023 and 4 and current. But that was like early 2021, and that was the first time I ever went and did that. So that was like kind of a crazy thing back then. Remember at the time I took the Oklahoma trip, I had about 400 subscribers. I still remember that. I had like a little over 400 when I did that. Like I said, some of Oklahoma has aged well, some of it hasn't. In hindsight, I should have done that trip by myself. I think that would have been a much better scenario, better setting. Phoenix almost went with me. That was supposed to be me and Phoenix's trip, I think. There was a brief time period where I think that was going to be me and him tag teaming that. But that ended up not happening because he just so happened to have a family vacation in Florida. It was, like I said, there was always something personal coming up that kept us from making videos or whatever. But I really didn't know how that was going to go. Just traveling around and filming nothing but abandoned places for days, or it only lasted like 2.5 days, but it felt like it was going to be days. like getting a hotel. I'd never gotten my own hotel before. I'd never gone to 6 abandoned places in a day before until like the first couple days in Oklahoma. And I'd never like just been out on my own in that kind of setting before. So it was exciting. It was kind of stressful. It was kind of scary, but it was kind of surreal. I remember I got the first 2 in kind of to get the ball rolling. A couple random towns up on that corner of Oklahoma. And then it was Eastern State Hospital. Now that place, nobody had ever filmed that for a YouTube video back then. So that was kind of a crazy thing to do, but I got it done. And that was like, I didn't really realize how big that was back then, but once I posted it and it again became one of my more viewed ones, I was like, wow, that was kind of a crazy thing to do. But then from there, it was on to Tulsa, where I filmed 3 more, and then after that, drove the rest of the way to OKC. And by then it was nightfall, so got the hotel and got some shut-eye and was ready to go again tomorrow, because that whole day was going to be spent in OKC. That was like the last major city stop on the trip. All in all, by that point in the Oklahoma trip, I was kind of disappointed in some of the places being kind of lackluster. I felt like some of them were kind of empty, kind of boring, kind of whatever, but I was just kind of going from place to place. I had to get them all in. And then eventually, after that day in OKC, the next day where I filmed 6 more, I was on the way home and I had time for like another 1. So I stopped by this other town in Muskogee, or this other town called Muskogee, and I hit that old hotel. And that place ended up being like one of my favorite ones back then. Like, not just of on that trip, but ever. That was so cool, that old vintage hotel that had all that crazy old furniture in it. It wasn't in too good a shape. It was falling apart, but there was so much stuff in there. There was old restaurants and bars down below. There was crazy old vintage furniture up above, and I remember that was the perfect one to kind of end that trip and that experience on. And so I drove like 5 hours home from that point on, and enjoyed the rest of my spring break at home, just kind of taking it all in, the crazy thing I'd just done. The days after Oklahoma trip, I was riding this high, thinking like, wow, I just covered the channel for like 4 months with that trip, like, because I post every week, and I just filmed 13 of them all at the same time. That's like, if you do the math, like week by week, that's like 3-ish, almost 4 months. So I was riding this high like, wow, this channel's in good shape, you know, we're at like 400 subs, it's been growing, like, this is great. And that high would not last long. Wichita, Kansas. Anyone who knows the J-Co-Urbex channel knows where I'm going with this. Wichita, Kansas. I had posted 1 Oklahoma video from that run shortly after that trip, because, you know, the week had come, so I posted the first one. So even though like I could have taken a break from exploring if I wanted to, but I didn't want to, I found myself back in Wichita, Kansas for a weekend bowling event. And even though I just filmed this big trip like a week or 2 ago, I wanted to film a few videos in Wichita while I was there for this bowling event. Still to this day, I remember having like 3 or 4 places around Wichita in mind, but there was one that I wanted to go to first for a return video, the big abandoned factory. So the whole thing was going to be a weekend event. I was bowling on Saturday and Sunday, but I had time to work a few explore times around that too, so that was what the plan was. So Friday night, I drove over from Springfield, Missouri to Wichita, and the very first place I went Friday night was that factory. And I don't even need to describe what happens next. Anyone who's watching this video right now, chances are they've already seen the video, they know exactly what happens, but lo and behold, the owner of that factory happened to pull up that night as I was there, and it turns out he's an absolute deranged psycho who would just pull up there, camp there, wait for people to show up, and would like try to catch them. And if they tried to run, he'd shoot them with his like crazy like pellet gun thing, or shotgun with non-lethal ammo, whatever it was. And that's what happened to me. He caught me there, had to wait like an hour and a half in some incredibly tight, uncomfortable handcuffs that he put on me. I don't even think that's legal, but nothing was ever done about it. And I went off to jail, and he went on. 15 minutes after that, I heard this happen myself over the policeman's radio as I was still in the car. He went on to shoot two teenagers who went in 15 minutes after they'd taken me. So it was an insane situation, an insane story. But lo and behold, suddenly I'm in jail. Luckily, I wasn't in jail for long. I was only in there for about 45 minutes, maybe an hour. They had me in a couple holding cells until they got me my court date paperwork and just dumped me back out on the street, because obviously the crime I committed wasn't anything serious. They weren't going to keep me for long or overnight or anything. Plus, I told the cop I was there to bowl, so maybe he pulled some strings and told them to have me out of there by the morning, but that's how that went. And the whole weekend was ruined. Like, I still bowled okay, like I kind of locked in. When I bowl, I really lock in. I'm like a serious bowler, so it didn't really affect my bowling, but nobody there who I was bowling with had any idea what had happened to me the night before. They just thought I was tired when I told them that crazy story later, and they couldn't believe it. But yeah, that whole weekend was ruined. And I remember I had to finish editing and post the second Oklahoma video right as this all happened. This was like, I want to say March or April 2nd of 2021. April 2nd, I believe it was, when this happened. And so I had to post and finish editing the second Oklahoma video the very night after that happened. And you can imagine, I didn't want anything to do with abandoned places after that. I did not want to be sitting there and editing my footage of an actually successful video, but I kind of had to because Sunday was coming and I had to post. So I did that in my Wichita hotel room, and that was such an unpleasant weekend. Anyway, after that weekend, I drove back to Springfield, Missouri. I kind of told my parents what had happened. I kind of slowly broke the news to them so they didn't freak out. Like, I didn't just outright say, I got arrested, I got arrested, I got arrested. You know, I was kind of like, so something kind of happened, and then I kind of broke down the story to them. So I'm on the phone with them, kind of explaining to them this paperwork I have, explaining my court date, and I was almost kind of thinking it was like a ticket. I thought it was something I just have to pay off and to be fine. But they were explaining to me, no, it's like actually a serious thing. Like, this is going to be on your record. Like, you actually have to go to court for this. There could be worse charges. Obviously, there most likely wouldn't, but it'd probably just be a fine. But there was that possibility. So they suddenly like got me to realize that this was like a serious thing. This is a lot more than just like, I have to pay a few bucks and I'm fine. And then it started to dawn on me that like, I really can't explore anymore, at least for the time being, because of this. And as it really started to sink in, like I'm on the phone with like my parents, and as it's starting to like really sink into me, like I just started like breaking out into tears. I'm like, oh my God, like what am I gonna do now? Like, it's over, this is all over. Now what? Like, what do I do now? Because like this channel by that point was like my biggest thing. It was my biggest passion. Like, it was the thing that I already said, like this is gonna lead me to a great life, like being able to like go around to these abandoned places and just travel the country. And I was just thinking like, it's over. Like, what do I do now? Like, how do I keep myself preoccupied? How do I find a new purpose? Like, what's my purpose now if this is over? I was like bawling in like my dorm room as my parents were trying to calm me down. Like, obviously they wanted me to be done anyway. They didn't like the dangers and the threats, and obviously I just finally been arrested, so there was that. So sure enough, I had to drive over the next month back to Wichita to meet up with the attorney I got. I got an attorney. I'm not sure if that really did me any favors at all, given that really all I had to do was pay like a fine. But he convinced me to go this route called diversion, which, if any of you don't know legal jargon or what diversion is, that's basically this thing where if your charges will be off your record if it's your first time offense, which it was for me. I'd never done anything wrong before. I never had any other charges for anything. But those charges will be off your record forever if you basically go the next year without picking up any other charges and like report to a probation officer and everything like that. So basically that was the moment I realized, wait, maybe it's not over forever. Maybe I just have to let this thing run its course. I'll take a year off from exploring and I'll just try to figure out what to do with myself in that year. But once this thing is over, once this is off my record, I'm coming back. I'm coming back in full force. So that's kind of the point in this channel's history where I have to go on like a year-long hiatus. Now, nobody knew this was happening for like a couple months. Nobody knew because I had all these Oklahoma videos I was posting. Because remember, this happened when I'd only posted one and I still had 12 others to post. So the channel stayed alive week to week for the next couple months, like I said, until about, June or so. May or June. That's when the final Oklahoma videos ran out. And then from that point on, I think that's when I put out an announcement kind of saying, yo, something happened. It's kind of serious, so I'm going on hiatus. And from that point on, everything I posted on the channel was kind of a throwback. From those times back in Springfield when I was like with the pals going out and filming stuff, I kind of accumulated a lot of extra footage of just what I called mini episodes, just places that I'd already been before or places that weren't quite good enough for like a full-length video, because like at this point I wanted the channel to be kind of like more professional, like big places, you know, good worthy places. So little farmhouses or other smaller stuff that I went with the pals and kind of filmed it just to film it. Like that's when I started posting that footage, just because I had nothing else to film. So for several weeks and a couple months, it was just kind of a bunch of these little miniature episodes just to keep the channel alive, just so I wasn't like posting nothing. And yeah, eventually I kind of ran out of those too, so the channel really did kind of go into an era of kind of inactivity, where rather than a video every week, it'd be maybe one every month or every 2 months, kind of just whatever I could find just to post. I'd like try to pull up all my old footage and try to scrape something together out of it. I made like a deleted scenes video. I made like a compilation of places I couldn't get into, but I tried. I made like a re-edit of some old videos, just stuff like that. But eventually it's like summer, like I'm off school. Obviously after getting arrested, I didn't do any more exploring while I was down in Springfield, because for a while there I thought it's over. Like I remember texting the entire extended friend group like, guys, it's over. This thing happened. It's done. I'm done. But obviously like that was before I realized diversion and I could kind of like have it off my record and kind of come back maybe. But eventually that school year ended and I was on summer break, so I went back home, and obviously I didn't have anything to post, so I wasn't really doing anything except posting those little mini episodes. Until one day my family took a family vacation up to Michigan, up in like some rural place in the UP. And this, to this day, is one of like the best coincidences that's ever happened to me in this channel's history. One of like my most sentimental favorite like memory videos that I've ever done. This little tiny podunk Michigan town we were staying in had an abandoned school, a freshly abandoned school that we could get into right down the street from the house we were staying in. What are the odds? So I broke protocol and we filmed that video there, and that, like I said, was one of my absolute sentimental favorites. I had my sisters there. I had Connor, Carla's now fiance. They're actually getting married next year. They were just dating back when this was filmed in summer 2021, but we had him there. We had my cousin Alyssa there because she lives up in Michigan, and just the circumstances of us happening to be there in a town that had that was just amazing, and I couldn't miss that opportunity. That's why I broke protocol and just kind of went and filmed that with them. It was just kind of like a one-off thing. It was like, all right, I'm doing this, and it's back to hiatus, because I'm not going to risk this on like a weekly basis while I'm still waiting for this thing to be off my record, you know, because I'm writing like little paper letter things to my probation officer every month, like, nope, didn't do anything, everything's fine, you know, stuff like that. That was like the one explore-based thing I did that summer, but man, what a memory that was, just the circumstance. Lo and behold, summer ended and it was suddenly back to school for my senior year of college, my final year. But before that, my parents were like adamant, like they knew I went to like the Michigan school because like they waited at the house while we all went and did it, but like that kind of made them mad, like that kind of pissed them off a bit. They were like, all right, you're going into your senior year, you need to focus on school. You are not to do any abandoned place stuff. You are not to get into any trouble. If I even hear about you doing any abandoned stuff, then you're paying for like the whole rest of your college, because like they were helping me pay for it, obviously. I was a college student. I didn't really have much of any money on my own back then. I hadn't taken out any student loans yet, but I had like some scholarships and whatever. But even without the abandoned stuff, like I was depressed. I was just not in a good space back then, and some of my classes I was like falling behind in. I just didn't have any motivation, just because I wasn't having fun at school, and obviously I didn't have any motivation because I couldn't do the channel or anything. Like I had bowling and that was about it. But I was starting to like struggle in my classes, and eventually I think eventually I lost one of my scholarships because my GPA sunk a little bit too low. I did end up bringing it back up in the end, but because of that I did end up having to take out a student loan. So that was kind of like my chance to be like, I I guess that deal's off. Now I already am paying for the last year of my college, so regardless of what they think about it, I'm gonna go back to abandoned place filming when I can. So obviously that's kind of one of the things that led up to another kind of one-off like video. It's like, all right, this is a one-time thing. We're back to hiatus after this because we can't keep risking it. But like, I couldn't stay away. I was like an addict who was recovering from like their substance of choice. Only my substance was abandoned places. Like I was like, all right, I just gotta do it. Gotta have one every now and then, you know. And so all of a sudden it's like, I want to say early January of something, 2022 at this point. And so lo and behold, there's this abandoned hotel inn thing in Springfield that was recently abandoned. And I'm driving by this thing every now and then. I'm like, I gotta go do that. I gotta go do that. I gotta go hit that. So eventually I did. And that ended up being the Springfield Inn video. Just another one of those one-off hiatus is broken just this once and then we're back on kind of things. But yeah, by then it was like January and I was the year was half over. I was about to graduate. So like big things were happening in life. And I knew I was like just a few months away from coming back. I think the timing of it was Diversion would end by August that year. So like August was going to be like my big comeback or something. That's what I had in my head at least. So it's also kind of around this time that I filmed 2 kind of secret videos. So let's put a little marker up here. I'm going to come back to those in a minute. So I'd filmed like the one-off video in summer. I filmed the other one-off video in like January of just 2 places that I knew I had to hit because I just couldn't help myself. There was 2 others that I filmed kind of after those in the same kind of period of time. But otherwise, my big return, Diversion was going to be over by about August. So that was going to be my big comeback. And already at that point, it was already kind of like a done deal. Like I didn't have to report to the probation officer anymore. I just needed to not get arrested again before like August and that would be done. It'd be good. So finally I decided, since it's kind of already a done deal, posting the footage isn't going to affect my case at all because this is why I held off on it for so long. I decided I was finally going to post the Wichita video. I didn't want to post it initially because I didn't want to affect the case or whatever in case they decided to throw it out, which was what I was hoping for, but they didn't. So with like a few months left on this Diversion thing, I'm like, you know what? This is already a done deal. It doesn't matter. I've already paid the fee and everything. We're going to post the Wichita video. And so in March of 2022, that went up. The Wichita video that I'd waited a year to post finally went up. The most insane thing to ever happen to me in an abandoned place and the most insane video I'd ever filmed and hopefully ever will film. I remember the whole extended friend group, or extended, at least like 7 or 8 of us, literally got together and watched that video all together because they had all been waiting to see it. I hadn't let anyone get any sneak peeks. I kept this footage such a secret until the day it was finally going to go up. So this is a big crazy deal uploading this thing. I still remember posting it and just watching the views go up like the entire day. Like, wow, it's finally out. This is one of the most insane Urbex videos anyone's ever going to see. Like, I remember thinking that. I remember thinking like, all right, this is a horrible thing that happened to me, but the silver lining is at least the views it's going to get are going to be kind of crazy. So there was that at least. I was trying to find the silver lining because I was like, all right, maybe that video will blow up the channel and suddenly the dream future will be back on again, you know? So that was the big thing for a while. Again, I was still on hiatus technically, so I didn't really post much of anything after that for a few months. But finally, we're just a few weeks away from graduation, and even though I shouldn't have come back at that point yet, I ended up coming back anyway, because I ended up just doing it, finding a reason. Due to events that will forever be a quandary to the cosmos forever, I came back a little bit early in a massive butterfly effect of events that would from that point on change the trajectory of the channel permanently. Emma was a part of that initial friend circle, that friend group. What you'd really consider the friend group could depend on a lot of things. Everyone's got friends, everyone's got like friends of friends of friends and everything. The general core of that circle kind of comprised like 5 or 6 people maybe. And then if you want to extend it farther beyond to like friends of friends of friends, then maybe it's like 10 or 12 people. But Emma was kind of one of those, kind of on the fringe, wasn't too active in it, but we all knew each other, we all knew her, we've all hung out with her before, you know. But me and her had never hung out, like, just to hang out before. It was always just around the group because she was in a relationship with someone else within the group. And it wasn't a relationship that I ever supported much at all. It's just kind of one of those things where it's like, oh wow, you guys are so cute together, you guys are so good together, you really bring out the best in each other, and then you're like looking away, just like rolling your eyes. Like, it's just one of those things where you can't really say anything because you don't want to offend anyone, but it's just one of those things. And lo and behold, eventually one night, as it's just a few weeks away from me graduating and leaving town, I kind of hit up some of the gang. I was like, yo, anyone want to go bowling? It was a random Wednesday night and I was bored, just wanted to see if anyone wanted to hang. Nobody could, but she wanted to go anyway. She was like the one who was available. So we just went bowling, just the two of us. And that was the first time we ever just like hung out, just the two of us. And I remember we got like McDonald's afterwards and she paid for mine. So I later returned the favor at another occasion by paying for hers. I just remember that night being like the first time I ever like actually like got to know like her without like everyone being around. It was like the first time I ever like really taken her seriously as like her own individual person. And so like I said, I want to say we went and bowled again another time, and then that's when I paid for her McDonald's to kind of repay the favor of the first one. She started to become more active within the group now that we were like hanging out more. The group would go bowling as often as they could. I remember back then around this time it was like this big deal. I remember the big deal was that I couldn't decide whether I wanted to live full-time down in Springfield and get a job down there and just live there, or go back home to KC and live there. So that was like the big 50-50, like I'm trying to decide one or the other. And that's what everyone was kind of like talking with me about back then. Like, am I gonna stay, am I gonna go? Like, I've got this big Venn diagram of things that could pull me in either direction. So that's what was going on at that time. So everyone was like trying to get in like time with me in case I was gone for a long time after that, because without college I wouldn't be around Springfield much longer. So in one of those last little group kind of excursions off to the bowling alley, I remember it got brought up that Emma was like one of the few ones within like the closer knit circle of the group that had never like gone with me to an abandoned place and never been in a video. So that's kind of how it got brought about, the idea of that. And then obviously, like, because I said like time was running out because I might leave Springfield, we kind of had to like do that soon if we really wanted to do that. And it was at the same time I'd been on Google Maps. You know, I'd been dreaming of coming back for a year at that point, almost a year. So I'd be on Google Maps all the time trying to find abandoned places. There was this one out in a little town near Springfield called Ash Grove. I don't know how I hadn't noticed it sooner, but it was a decently sized building that I noticed, and it turned out to be a nursing home. So after talking with them, I was like, all right, that's our one. We're gonna go film that, and that's gonna be our video. So I remember the day before we were set to do that, or at least a day or two before, I drove all the way up there to Ash Grove just to check on it, just to see if it was doable, to see if it was still there, to see if there was a way in. That was the first time I'd ever done that. I went all the way out of my way to go to an abandoned place without actually going in, because I was saving it up for like the actual video itself. It's like a behind the scenes thing. So that was the first time I ever did that. And when I saw open windows and ways in, I remember being so happy, like, wow, we're gonna be back again. We're about to film one, it's gonna be great. And so we went and did that the next day. I remember a couple others ended up getting invited along, but lo and behold, me and Emma just kind of ended up being like the stars of that video. Like, we were both just on camera, just having a good time, and like that kind of video-based chemistry that you want to see in like a YouTube video. And lo and behold, that ended up being like a really fun day. So we decided from there that before I left town forever, because by that point I had like a week left, we wanted to do it again. Like, we wanted one more like big exploring night out. Only this time it'd be like just the two of us. So we plotted that out. And I still remember this. This was the final week of school. I should have been studying for finals, but I ended up doing fine on my finals, so don't worry about me. I should have been studying for finals, but all the classes I had left were kind of easy cakewalk ones, so I wasn't. So instead of doing that, we planned out this night to just go drive over an hour over west to Joplin And that night ended up being like the most fun exploring night like I've ever had. Felt like I was back. Like technically I shouldn't have been back because it was still a few months too early, but I was back in that moment. Like we were there filming videos because I want to get back to this mark I said put in there several minutes ago when I was talking about a couple more secret videos. I filmed a couple secret videos kind of in those early winter days of 2022. One of them was at the vacant closed CVS. I just want to preface this. I don't know what I was thinking. With me still being like on my legal probation stuff, I had absolutely no business trying anything as stupid as that, yet I did anyway because I was like I said, I missed it so much. I just had to go out and do something that night. And then I also filmed shortly after that at the closed down college for a third time where I finally did get into a dorm successfully. So there were those two. Suddenly I had those two videos to upload because now I had all these videos that we were filming now to upload. So suddenly I kind of had a weekly schedule again. It just felt like I was back. That's kind of how me and Emma's duo started, kind of that night in Joplin, because we had so much fun and I had all those videos to suddenly post again. And so even though those first two, like the CVS and the college, aren't really technically duo era videos, I kind of lovingly consider them like duo era because that's when the channel suddenly came back off a hiatus. But otherwise, we filmed 2 in Joplin, and that night was so much fun. There's so much off-camera stuff that I never posted, but I still have the footage for. We tried so many duds that didn't work, but we came away with funny footage anyway. We did succeed at the TV station, and that video was like one of my most special favorite videos for a while. And then we kind of succeeded at this other one. It ended up being the one where we titled it The Most Scared We've Ever Been. We technically didn't get in, but we kind of had experiences that made it worth being a video, so we ended up making that a video anyway just to tell those experiences. And then like we tried a couple more after that, but it was late at night and we were more duds, so we just drove all the way back. And like we got back to Springfield at like 1 a.m. Such a fun night. Like I was finally back and it was like more fun than ever. Because me and her, like as you knew, like we were becoming like best friends at this time. Because like we just started hanging out, like we were starting to like get to know each other on like a more personal level, like without like all the friend group and everything. Exploring. We were having like real like deep conversation. I remember there was one night in the bowling alley parking lot till like 2 a.m. just talking life, our futures, our pasts, our everything. Off camera, as we started exploring, like we kind of developed like this bond, and that's when we started like calling each other best friends and everything. After that night in Joplin, that's pretty much like the night we basically like said to each other, like, you know, here in this moment in world history, you're my best friend in the whole world. I think we had some sort of silly like exchange like that or something. But it was a very bittersweet thing because we knew I was about to be leaving town basically forever. Like obviously, you know, I'd still visit from time to time, but like it was kind of like just this thing of like, wow, we've got this newfound bond and everything. That's kind of what Joplin was all about, like one last big hurrah. That's what I call it. I called that night in Joplin like the last hurrah, the last thing like I'd ever do like abandon wise around like the general Springfield area. So finally graduation day comes and I walked the stage. I went and got like Freddy's with pals afterwards, and then me and Emma decided that we were going to spend my final moments in Springfield together. Remember that last night, the day I graduated, I sat around my completely empty campus because everyone had left for like 3 or 4 hours later after waiting for her to get off work. And then we went to this abandoned house. This is all off camera. There's no footage of any of this. We went to this abandoned house, and then we went up onto this like old abandoned like train track bridge going over like a span of lake that's down there in Springfield. And that was... And then after we, you know, ate Culver's or whatever, that was like our last moments of me in Springfield, and we hugged goodbye, and that was kind of it, and I drove home. And so kind of in the days after I got home, we kind of kept talking, and it kind of got brought about almost in like a joking kind of way. It was one of those things where it was brought up kind of as a joke, but we both secretly really wanted to do it. It kind of got brought up, yo, I could just keep driving back down. Let's make the channel a duo effort. Like, let's make this our channel. Let's just film as many videos as we can with whatever time we've got. That wasn't gonna be easy. Like, I knew that wasn't going to be easy. That came with like a lot of like scheduling, that came with a lot of like planning, a lot of just like everything. And obviously boundaries needed to be set because we weren't, remember, she was with this other dude within the group, we weren't together. So I kind of set those boundaries earlier by telling her, yo, if this dude can't handle that, then we're gonna like quit. But from this point on, we're a team now. Like, this is a team effort. This channel is a team effort. So what I did was I basically used Springfield as like a center point, because that's, you know, where she's from, that Springfield area. If you take Springfield as like the center point and draw an imaginary circle on a map around Springfield, everywhere, every abandoned place I could find within that circle on like a 3 or 4 hour drives radius on either side of the circle, those are going to be the places we hit as our duo. Because like obviously we're not together like that, so we can't like be multi-day tripping. We can't be like out too crazy late at night or anything. Like, we have to have time to drive out to some place, film it, and drive back within the same day. It's always got to be a one-day deal. Those are like the boundaries that were set early. You got to keep that in mind, because that's going to come back to be very important later. So I mapped out all these abandoned places kind of like across the south of Missouri. I remember knowing that like there were certain areas in Arkansas that were kind of in play. There was obviously Kansas City. Kansas City is within that circle. And then kind of St. Louis is kind of over there, kind of on the fringe. That's kind of far away, but St. Louis has so many places that if we drove up to St. Louis, we'd probably have time to film one or two, and before driving back, just that's kind of what the duo blueprint looked like. And so that's what we started doing. This is what made like the duo so great, and I'll get to that in a minute. But it's our origin stories for even wanting to do stuff like that were the same. But eventually, finally, I made it back down a couple weeks later, and we went across, kind of halfway across Missouri, and filmed like at this janky apartment place. I remember that was like the first time we were like traveled like far away like that to do it, and we had so much fun. We kind of had to be back a little bit sooner, so that's all we really had time for. We might have been able to squeeze one more in if we really tried that day, but instead we chose to go to this roadside attraction down in Missouri called Uranus. I know, funny name, that's why it's funny. Crazy roadside, almost mini amusement park, only it doesn't have rides or anything. It's just a bunch of like little stores. It's got fudge, it's got little tourist attractions. Just Google it, you'll see what I'm talking about. We stopped there instead. We were driving on the way back, and so she mentioned to me that our best bet for going again to film our next video would be the next week after that, because we did that on a Wednesday. And I guess every now and then she had Wednesdays off from her job, so Wednesday kind of became like our explore day. So next Wednesday I drove back down again. I'd wake up at about 5 a.m. from where I was, so I could drive 3 hours down to Springfield, pick her up, and then I'd drive like another couple hours across Missouri, and boom, we'd hit some spots. So that's what we did that next time too. That's the one where we filmed at the abandoned hospital, and then we filmed at the abandoned like nursing home that was once a school kind of place. And that was like our first ever like double feature kind of day. That's the day where we really utilized some time well and filmed those two. And then we got home, and then we filmed another third video that night at this other place that was closer to her home or something. I don't know, I just remember those kind of days were like what made me so happy to be back. Like, not only did I feel like I was back after a year-long hiatus that seemed to go on forever, but I was back and I was having more fun than ever. It was even more fun than the first time I was doing it in like those Kansas City eras. So like, it was just such a relieving feeling to be back, and it just felt like my little bit of escape from life, because, you know, I was still like, I was a depressed dude straight out of college, still trying to figure out where to even go with life. I was working a job I didn't really like, just, you know, for the money and everything to keep driving around and traveling. So that's where I was at this time, and these kind of days just felt like such an amazing escape. And it wasn't just about the abandoned places, it was just like the idea of it. It was like just me and her against the world, going out and having fun. It wasn't just the abandoned places, it was like the in-car conversations, it was like the sit-down meals and everything. And this kind of goes back to like both of us having the same origin story for this kind of stuff. Turns out she was a big fan of the exact same kind of YouTube videos that I'd been a big fan of that inspired me to even do this thing in the first place. So both of us just knew together exactly what we wanted our videos to look like and how they wanted it to feel, and we were just going out and making it happen. It was just such a special time. And I just remember the videos themselves, obviously I've been off for a year. The Wichita video was, it was getting views and everything. The channel was getting bigger, but our videos weren't necessarily getting crazy views. But I just remember not really caring because, like, who cares? Like, we're having fun and that's all that really matters. And by this point, with the Wichita video and just the time that had expired between when I'd done Oklahoma, when I had 400, and then the channel was pulling up to 1,000 subscribers. We were about to get to 1,000 subscribers. A couple weeks after that other double feature, we made it back down once again, drove all the way across Missouri once more, and filmed 2 more. One of them at that crazy weird community center school that I worked so hard to get into because I wanted that one to work out so much. I wanted us to get that video. I still call that like one of my most insane building entrance efforts. And then we filmed at this crazy weird like factory place where we just kind of climbed it, and then we saw a cop pull up to our car from the top of the factory, and we thought that had to be there for us, so we panicked and ran out. I remember that was like our 1,000 subscriber special video. That's the first video I filmed with 1,000 subs, so we kind of celebrated it together in that video. But unbeknownst to us, that would be the last video we ever filmed. Remember, after we filmed that day, I was in Springfield. I always stayed in Springfield overnight after our Explorer days, just so I didn't have to drive home the same day, and so I could hang out with like everyone else at the house, because back then some of our friend group people had a house all in themselves, so that would be like a little party place. So I always stayed in Springfield 2 days when I went down for us to film our duo videos. And next day, me and Emma actually went to Branson while everyone else was like kind of busy that day. And when we went to Branson, we were maybe going to film a video down there, but then we just decided to have fun with it and just go to some crazy attractions. We went to like the Titanic Museum, and then we went and just ate at some like 50s themed restaurant. And I remember I dropped her off at her brother's house, hugged her goodbye, and that was the last time I ever saw her. See, the thing is, back then, during that time, I knew, even while it was all fun and everything, even while I was having more fun than ever and she was having more fun than ever and we were doing our crazy videos and it was just a blast, in my head, I always knew that was only going to be temporary because, like I said, we had this circle around Springfield, all those places we could hit. But when you take away like Kansas City, there's really not that many options that we can feasibly hit in an efficient manner or way of time. So I knew that not only was it temporary like that, but it was temporary in the sense that we're not even together, she's with someone else. This has the very real possibility of going wrong if suddenly someone decides that they don't want her to hang around me anymore. Put a marker up there again. We're going to get back to this in a minute. Gary, Indiana. Yeah, I said it. Gary, Indiana was a town that I knew of because it was like the most abandoned place in the country, at least per capita. For a town of that size to have that many abandoned places is insane. And I don't remember how I knew of that place. I just knew of that place just as being an explorer, I guess. And I started to consciously think that when Duo ends, because we'd advertise it as temporary, logistically it's temporary, there's nothing we can do, it's eventually going to end sometime. I started to think about that place and I was like, when this ends, that's where I'm going to go. Remember that marker up there. So anyway, with all I just said, August 19th, 2022, I was trying to make plans with her. We were talking about the next time we were going to go explore, and her birthday was coming up, so I was talking about the ways we could celebrate that possibly. When suddenly she delivers me the message that her dude was no longer comfortable with us just hanging out one-on-one. Now keep in mind all the crazy stuff I already have to do just to make this work, just because it's at least fun. I had to wake up at like 5 a.m. and drive all the way down to Springfield, and I had to then drive like 3-4 more hours across the state to film a place, and then 3 or 4 back across the state, and then finish driving home the next morning. And this is during a time when the economy was bad. The gas, a simple 16-gallon tank of gas would cost me upwards of like $60, $70. So I was doing a lot of driving, going way out of my way for all this. And then suddenly she hits me with something like, he's not comfortable with us spending time together one-on-one anymore, so Pretty much the gist of it was we can't really hang out one-on-one anymore without someone else being there to like watch us and everything. That's kind of what the gist of that was. Meaning like other people from that general friend group. Now, I didn't want that. I did not want that. So what we've got to remember is that a year had passed. A year passed by between when I'd been filming with them and I was all close with them and now, when it was just me and Emma doing our duo thing. The whole landscape of that friend group had vastly changed in that year. Phoenix was gone. He was off at like Air Force training. He'd be gone for like a month, so nobody had seen him around or really heard from him in a long time. Over that past year, there'd been a lot of just personal issues within that group too, especially some that pertain to me in general. Speaking very personally from the heart, I had grown to feel that there was almost intentional sabotage within that group, just like what was happening right then in this moment, or right then in that moment, to purposely try to keep me from being close with any individuals rather than just keep the whole group as a massive group and have to do everything with the group all the time. There was a little bit of that. There was almost like this, I don't want to say toxic, but very like toxic underlying unspoken rule that anything I do with one person within that group, I have to do with like 6 or 7 others. Almost like as if they were like my kids and I'm their dad and I have to like give them all equal attention. I'm just like, no, that's not how friendships work. I am closer with some people than others. It had happened back in the day a little bit when me and Phoenix would try to hang out. I'd try to spend time with him and suddenly there'd be 3 or 4 people there and suddenly it's a whole event. And I'm like, well, I'm just trying to get time with my bro. And now it was happening again. I had the channel. I had an entire year off, a year hiatus, just pining away to come back and get back into it. I had all those months, that entire year, to really think about what it was going to be to come back. And I knew what I wanted the channel to look like, and I didn't necessarily want it to be that kind of group stuff anymore. I kind of tried to explain that to them before, but at least the ones who were like really adamant that I just do it their way never really understood that. There's a lot more I could say about that, but just to keep our story moving along. Long story short, I basically just told her, yeah, I don't want to do that. Because I knew that was just going to be a gateway thing to suddenly, our videos aren't our videos anymore. They're not our duo anymore. It's just right back to this group thing that I used to do, but I didn't really want to do anymore. So I basically told her, yeah, if that's the way it has to be, then we need to just end the duo. And so I asked her, and that clearly pissed her off a lot. So I asked her, let's just film one more and we'll call it quits there. Like I wanted to film one more so like we at least had a decent way to like end it and announce that it's done. And mind you, I was gearing up right as that conversation happened over text. I was gearing up for a family vacation. Just a little weekend getaway down at some like little river resort where we could fish and swim or whatever. And I just remember that whole weekend was ruined. I had no fun that weekend because suddenly the duo was done and I could tell she was angry at me now because the next day she refused to talk. I literally went to her the next day again, like to say like, you know, we should talk about it more. Maybe that wasn't fair, me just cutting it right there, but she refused to talk to me about it. A few days go by, we had discussed maybe just doing a talking video by voice call or whatever. However, that would have worked for a YouTube video where we would have said that the duo was over, and that would have been kind of a horrible way to end it. And I basically said something like, you don't have to if you want, I can take care of that. She completely misinterpreted what I'd even said. She thought I was telling her, no, we can't do that. So she took that as me saying, no, you can't say goodbye. That's not what I was saying. I was saying, no, we should talk about it more if you would ever mature up and actually talk to me, because at this point a week had gone by and she basically just cut me out. Like she ended like our snap streak of like 500 days, refused to talk to me. I tried to talk about it on like 2 or 3 different times and she would never hear me out at all. But this particular time when I said, you don't have to, I can handle that video if you want, that was just me trying to be reassuring, like you don't really have to call because I know you're just mad at me right now. But she misinterpreted that so badly that just launched into this massive just argument over like text. it was nothing but back and forth of me trying to explain what I really meant, and even trying to explain to her, yo, if you just talk to me, I would literally give you exactly what you were asking for initially. But she just would not listen. She wouldn't read. She wouldn't interpret anything. She just kept like yelling at me through text about stuff. And that just made everything so much worse. My memory's kind of hazy. Every like couple days or a week or so, I'd try to like get her to talk to me, because it was clear she was just gonna cut me out of her life by that point, it looked like. And every time I tried to open that up, the dude would be immediately in my messages like, stop talking to her, you know, everything like that. And I was like, I basically like kissed his ass and basically just told him whatever he wanted to hear. Like, I was like, yo bro, you and me could still be friends too, or whatever. Like, I didn't want that dude anywhere near me ever again, because I knew what we were going through was exactly what he wanted. That's exactly what he was hoping would happen, that a rift would open up between us like that. Remember, like I said, I already said that I never supported their relationship. My respect for him, the more me and her had hung out, had just bled out over time, because I just did not think this dude was good for her or anything. Every time I'd have this dude just angrily in my DMs, what I really wanted to say was just, you know, take a seat, limp dick, you got what you wanted. But all I really said was just whatever he wanted to hear, because I thought maybe if things were to ever go back to normal, I'd need him to think that I still want to be pals with him too, just so that me and her could ever be friends. That was where my headspace was at. But I already come to my very, very solid conclusion in my brain at this time. If that dude ever did anything, said anything, even hinted anything that I heard of behind my back, of trying to create any sort of rift between us, if anything happened between us that had to do with him, he was going to be out of my life permanently, and I have not budged on that since. Oh, and when the news broke to the rest of the friend group that I would have rather just gone back to being a solo channel again than have them like infiltrating every single video that me and her were trying to film, you know, they started passing around all these like little rumors and conspiracy theories. They were saying, oh, you're just trying to get with Emma, you're just trying to steal Emma from this dude. And I was just sitting there thinking, by doing what? Leaving? By leaving when those exact boundaries that were set early on were crossed? Or, you know, when they moved the goalpost to make it look like the boundaries were crossed? Let me tell you this. If the main goal, if the end goal of the duo was for me and her to wind up together or dating like that, I just wouldn't have left. All I would have had to do was just stick around. If my only competition was that dude, if it comes down to me versus him and who's her better option, and that kind of goes back to what I was saying when I just had to like kiss his ass and tell him whatever he wants to hear. Like, it was my roundabout way of saying, gee, sorry for accidentally treating your girl better than you've ever been able to for 3 months compared to your years. And for even more vindication on that subject, I didn't even know this until a few weeks ago when I hung out with some of the friends again, but I got word that they're not even together anymore. Let that sink in. Even with me getting kicked out of her life entirely, he still couldn't hang on to her. Let that sink in. But yeah, those boundaries being set weren't just to protect her and her relationship, or her so-called relationship. They're to protect me and the integrity of my channel, because I don't owe it to her to treat my channel with the same piss-poor standards she treats her dating life to. The entire purpose of the duo was to go out and for us to have fun filming the types of videos we wanted to film. And it wouldn't be fair to me if I'm not having fun doing that. If I'm just catering to someone else's baggage, you know? But no, if I wanted to get with her, if that was the end game, then I would have just played the long game, let everyone else infiltrate my channel, and just put up with it, and just play the long game for as long as it takes, because I was the closest thing to healthy she had in her life back then. Week 2 or 3 of her and her just absolute meltdown temper tantrum of me telling her no for the first time ever, even though in our completely one-sided friendship where it was me doing everything. Finally her birthday hit. I'm going to share with you a little bit of lore right now. I'm not sure I've told more than like 1 or 2 people this. Here's a real bombshell. If we had made it to her birthday, because she always used to talk about this, she always used to talk about wanting, like, because we were a duo, she always used to talk about wanting the channel like password. She wanted like access to the channel the same as me. She'd always talk about that. if we'd have made it to her birthday still functioning as a duo making videos, I would have given her like full access to the channel. Whether it be like, I don't think I would have given her like the actual password, but I would have given like her Gmail account like the same privileges as mine. But instead, when I tried to wish her happy birthday that morning, I got 3 little words. Stop texting me. Mind you, this is from someone who'd spent the past 3 months saying, oh, you're my best friend, I'm gonna be there for you, like, I've got your back, just stuff like that. Stop texting me when all I wanted to do was wish her a happy birthday. You could have written the most elaborate, in detailed, just absolute roast regarding everything about me and all my flaws, all my anxieties, all my personal problems, and it wouldn't have hit as hard as those 3 little words just absolutely deflated me that morning. That was the exact moment that it just kind of hit me that like, wow, okay, best friend, you're actually kind of a garbage person. Remember, like I said, all the things I had to do in that completely one-sided friendship just to make that duo happen. All the driving, all the gas money, all the planning I did around her schedule. I was the one taking days off of work. I was the one risking getting points, taking extra days off work just so I could fit around her schedule. I was doing all the driving. I was doing all the finding abandoned places, all the editing. And you know what? I was fine with that because it was still at least fun. We had fun doing it. But suddenly she wanted to change the plan to where I wouldn't even have fun and she wouldn't even hear me out, and suddenly just cut me out of her life, all because I voiced my disapproval of having to do that. So that was the point. I did have to end up making up or putting out that video, like I said, about where I just had to explain that the duo's over and that I'm gonna be just a solo channel again. Because our final video we had posted, we filmed those a couple weeks prior, so we kind of had time to work with. And in that video, that video's been completely deleted out of history. I don't even have the raw file of that video anymore, so I can't even remember all I said or did in that video, but I pretty much laid it all down in about 14 minutes, the stuff that had gone on. And she kind of vicariously kind of got outed as being a really fake, trashy excuse for a friend in that video, I guess. I don't even think I talked that much about it. I think I just said one line about how I wish I was worth more than my YouTube channel or something like that when I was describing how our friendship had just ended. And she blew up even more about that video. I still to this day don't know why. She claims that I made all that up when all I did was just pretty much explain verbatim exactly what she did, which was kick me out of her life, ghost me, and just refuse to speak to me, all because I said no to being a duo full-time. And that's another thing I didn't even mention. I told her we should end the duo. I didn't say I'd never speak to you again. I didn't say I'd never explore with you again. I just said we should end the duo, as in we wouldn't do it every single week, you know? As in it wouldn't be full-time. And for that, she kicked me out of her life. What a great friend. So yeah, she blew up about the duo. She blew up about even the video explaining the duo was done. And basically for months refused to ever speak to me. The only time she finally did speak to me through text was because other people within our friend group finally just talked her into it. And she gave just this really, in my mind, really just half-ass apology for it before immediately trying to shift the blame back onto me. I kind of did the same thing I did to the dude. I kind of just told her what she wanted to hear. Like, yeah, whatever. Like, sure, things can go back to normal, but I knew they weren't. Texting like that after all that goes down is just really pathetic. Like, there are certain things that you just sit down, look someone in the eye, and talk to them about. And I knew she was never going to do that because she had to have our other friends convince her even to just talk to me through text. And I knew that she and them were just doing it because they just wanted the friend group back together, even though I was adamant that the general group was never going to be like a thing again. I decided in that moment I was never going to hang out with a friend group that forced me to be around people I don't want to be around. I was only going to hang out with people that I genuinely wanted to hang out with and that I considered friends. And I know some of this stuff ends up happening like several months later, so I'm getting kind of ahead of myself in the story because what I did next after the duo fallout was insane. But eventually the group did try to get back together, and I was with like the people I wanted to see that weekend, and kind of just to stir up drama, they tried to like get her to come over there, and I was like, She was about to come over, and I just straight up left. I left the house to go run some errands because I thought she was about to come over. And that was like me. That was my way of telling her, you wanted me out of your life so badly the second I wouldn't take you to abandoned places and be your free abandoned place taxi anymore. And then suddenly you just want to come back and have things be normal without ever having sat down and spoken to me in person on your own accord. You wanted me out of your life so badly. Congrats. You got that. Now live with that forever. That was like what I was saying with that. You should have been careful what you asked for. You should have been careful what you wished for. Was that petty as hell? Yeah, it was, but justified as hell too. And that was also me telling the rest of them, we ain't doing this. I'm going to hang out with who I want, when I want, and y'all can get over it. That opened up more like texting, more angry texting. She was like, oh, why can't you just get over it? You're being so childish. I'm like, boy, this sounds so familiar. Boy, wouldn't it have been nice for you to go back in time and tell yourself from 6 months ago that when you decided to kick me out of your life just because I told you no. Like I said, the duo was temporary. And as it turned out, our friendship was only temporary too. And I kind of just knew that right from the get-go. I had kind of foreseen the future, and it ended up being even worse than I thought. Part of me had always known that because it was such a one-sided friendship, that the second the abandoned places were off the table, we probably just would never really hang out again or do anything again. But to be right about that, and to be right even worse than I thought, it was just... it's one of the most painful things I've ever been through. It genuinely is. Like, that hurt so unbelievably bad. Like, I can't even describe. That put me in such a bad place. Which is how we shift into the next era. Gary, Indiana. In the month between when the duo fell apart and when Gary, Indiana trip happened, I didn't even want to think about abandoned places. But here's a little detail in like a really toxic kind of way. I'm hella proud of this to this day. The very moment we had our we should end the duo conversation, mere minutes after I put the phone down from that text chat, I went into my work app and I selected like 6 straight days off near the end of September of 2022. And those 6 days ended up being the Gary trip. I was like, if the duo's done, I'm going to Gary, Indiana. But because of the fallout and everything, in the month leading up to that, I didn't even want to think about abandoned places. It was the most demoralizing thing to not only have Wichita happen and then have to go a year pining away, just waiting to come back. And then suddenly I'm back and it's better than ever. And then now I'm suddenly in the headspace where I don't even want to do this. Like, I went from missing doing it so much, not being able to suddenly being able to again, and I didn't even want to do it then. I forced myself into the mindset of, there's no excuses anymore, there's no legal problems, I've got nothing holding me back. Now I have all these days off from work, and so what's the excuse? Turn off your brain and go do it. I remember the days leading up to Gary, I didn't even know what to think. Like, I was majorly upset. Like, I was in such a bad place. I remember knowing the trip itself was going to be highly dangerous. Gary's like a dangerous place. I remember walking around work and like the days before my days off that were going to be that trip, look around like, wow, what if I die? Like, what if this is the last time I'm ever seeing this environment? What if I die there? Like, that was being really dramatic, but like, I didn't know what was going to happen. I never taken a trip like that by myself, not that far away, and not in the manner that I knew I was going to do it in. I remember I drove to Gary in complete silence. I didn't want to listen to any music. It was kind of like a psycho thing to do, drive 7 hours in dead silence like that, but that's what I did. I pulled into Gary really late. I initially, in my head canon, I wanted to get to Gary with just enough sun left to maybe film one to get my feet under me, but when I got there it was just pitch black, and I didn't want to film my first one in pitch black at night in Gary. I remember I could tell I got to Gary just by suddenly the buildings around me slowly becoming more and more boarded up. Like, I didn't even see any street signs that I was in Gary, but I knew when I was there that I was in Gary. I ended up getting a hotel in one of the next towns over, just a safer place, and because it was the only one that even seemed to have a functioning hotel, I got just like, it was like a Super 8 in Merrillville or something. I found a bowling alley that night. It was late, but it wasn't that late. So I bowled for a bit, and then I went to bed. And I woke up at the crack of dawn the next morning, and I drove like the 30 minutes up the road back to Gary, and pulled up to the Horace Mann High School. Horace Mann High School, I basically considered to be the video that, or you know, the first video on the Gary trip. That's kind of where the channel started over from scratch in a way. That's why I introed that video the way I did, where I said, my name is J-Co-Urbex. And then once I got in, I was like there was almost a sarcastic line of, let's see if I remember how to do this. Because I was in such a bad headspace, but I knew that I was off completely by myself filming abandoned places for the first time in over a year. So that's kind of where that came from. So filming that high school kind of got my feet under me. That's kind of a theme you'll see with all the trips I end up taking. Getting the first video in is always big, because suddenly, like, it's kind of like that's where I get to settle into a groove. So I filmed that one. I filmed another school after, I filmed another building, filmed a couple more schools. By then I've got like 5 videos under my belt, and my camera batteries needed to charge, so I drove back to the hotel. And I was like, wow, I've filmed 5 already. And so I definitely have time for a lot more today. Like, this is going pretty smoothly despite me being in the mental state that I'm in. So I relaxed at the hotel for a bit, got my camera batteries back to power, and I went out and filmed 4 more, I think. Yeah, 4 more. Another pair of like school kind of places. What was the other one that day? I can't even remember. I did like a theater, I did a few schools, and then suddenly I found myself in another school at like 10 at night. And I was just sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is my 9th video. I just filmed 9 videos in one day. And I don't know if I realized it in the moment, but I definitely did looking back on it later on. Just the irony of the number 9, and how we'd only filmed 9 duo videos over the span of like 3 months. But now that I was here, just left to my own devices with nothing to hold me back, I had like 9 videos all in one single day. And that was like the entire point of the Gary trip. That's why I went there, to do it really efficiently. Because in the mindset I was in, I didn't even want to think or worry about the channel for a while. I just needed to film a ton of videos and get it done with, so I could just kind of sit back, just worry about editing, not thinking about having to do anything. And then I can figure out what to do from there. So I went to bed after 9, woke up early the next day again. And the next day moved at kind of a slower pace. I remember, I guess I did a couple kind of bigger places in the middle of it. I know I woke up early and went to the hospital. Then I went to this big middle school. I spent some time in the gym shooting, I know. And then it was off to this huge high school. That was the 12th one. Gary number 12 was like the big one on the trip. I knew the moment I found that place, mapping it out, that it was going to be like the best one. So that was a pretty surreal video, getting around there in that school, being in this terrible headspace, 12 videos deep on this brutal trip, but suddenly being at that high school, like, whoa, this thing is crazy. Like, I'm filming one of the best places I've ever seen right here in this moment. And that's easily like one of the best videos on the trip. It has everything. It's a big, relatively untouched looking school. It had a pool. The pool was half full of water still. It had the crazy auditorium. And then I had like a scrapper encounter, I think, and then I kept hearing noises all over the building but couldn't find anywhere. It was a crazy video. And then after that one, I went to the church, the big abandoned church in downtown Gary everyone knows of. And after that, I decided I was going to charge my camera batteries again, but I brought chargers with me so that I didn't have to go back to the hotel. So I just settled back into, I just went to the McDonald's in downtown Gary, and I got a booth there. And I literally brought my entire power strip. I plugged in my flashlights to charge those. I plugged in my camera batteries to charge those. I forget if it was a little bit before then. Maybe it was in between when I filmed the church and when I got to the McDonald's, but I remember getting notifications on my phone of literally Emma leaving all of like the group's former like group chats, because obviously our duo collapse had kind of split the group down between who's supporting who. Like, I mean, not really. No one was picking sides. Everyone kind of unanimously was supporting me because they knew she was being insanely childish. But all that had happened, she basically just kind of cut everyone off for a little bit. Somehow, in some sort of cruel twist of irony, in between the span of when I hit that church and got to that McDonald's, my phone starts blowing up with just notifications of her leaving a bunch of like our old friend group Instagram chats, literally going out of her way to leave chats that hadn't even been touched in months, just out of pettiness. And obviously unfollowing me too on everything. So I'm just sitting here on this brutal trip with still half a day to go, and then part of another day after, on the trip that I had to take just to replace what should have been our era, because we still had so much meat left on the bone as far as what we could have filmed in our duo. I'm on this trip that had to replace that. And even while I'm on that, I'm getting notifications that she's being petty and like leaving all these leaving all these like chat groups. So that, even though I was trying to like put all that behind me while I was on this trip, that just brought it right back to the forefront. I started thinking so hard about that, about what I was doing right then in the moment, about what I had been doing just a month earlier, and just the differences between that, about how my alleged best friend had just kicked me out of her life and was never going to speak to me again. And so suddenly I'm just sitting at this McDonald's charging all my stuff, and that's all I can think about for like hours. It took like 3 hours for my batteries and stuff to fully charge for me to get back out there, because at that point I'd only filmed, I think it was 4 videos at that point that day. I was like, all right, I'm kind of behind schedule. I should have filmed more by now. Got to get out there and film a few more, even though it's going to get dark. But I'm just sitting there at this McDonald's, just reliving all these what were happy memories that are now just making me so sad. So that was very much one of those points where the burnout is setting in. I'm 13 videos deep on this trip. I know I have a lot to go. My battery's finally charged, so I waltz out of that McDonald's right as the sun's going down. And the next place I went was this place called Ivanhoe Elementary, and that's pretty much the point where you start to see me like kind of go crazy in that trip. There's a point where I get like really honest, and I'm like, all right guys, I'm really tired. I wish this trip was over, but I still have a lot to go. I said something like that in that video. And then Carver School, I just started acting like a maniac. Like I was so just disassociated with the whole thing at that point that I just started to become like a really just sarcastic goofball in that video that just couldn't be bothered to care about filming. I was just saying the wackiest things, just doing the wackiest things in that video. It was like me having like a controlled breakdown, like on camera, that entire video. I got hungry, I guess. I went to White Castle at like 10 o'clock. And I guess that kind of mellowed me out a little bit, that little break. So I kind of regrouped, and then I filmed the post office downtown, and that kind of ended day 2. So we'd filmed 9 videos day 1, 7 day 2. Our runtime was sitting at 16, and I was like, all right, tomorrow's a half day. I'm driving home at half point. I'm going to film like 4 more, and we're going to call it good at 20. But here's one thing I almost forgot to mention. I've only told like close friends this. This is one of the most insane things about the Gary trip. I've never publicly said this. The 3rd night, just so that I wouldn't keep bleeding money into a hotel, I slept in my car. I had a Volvo station wagon back then that had a lot of trunk space, so if I put the back seats down, I could lay down with just enough space to sleep. So I pulled off into some little side neighborhood street, just maybe 25 blocks from downtown Gary, Indiana, and I slept in the back of my car. I still to this day don't know why. I could have afforded the hotel, but maybe I just wanted to get really like immersed in the environment and everything. I don't know, but I slept in my car the 3rd night, and that place was quite honestly insane. Luckily, I didn't get robbed or mugged or anything, but it was not a very comfortable night, but I did at least get 5-6 hours, I think, so there was that. So the next morning I hit like the big factory place. I hit Banneker Elementary, and it was at that point, I was just shooting hoops in that gym, just trying to have a good time. That's honestly one of my best like actual happy memories from the Gary trip. Just shooting hoops in that gym. I felt like I was just kind of carefree in that moment, just shooting around, having fun. I had filmed it, had the GoPro on for some of it. That was like the good time I had in Gary, like the one good time. And I remember just thinking in that moment, you know what? We're 18 videos deep. I've done so many schools and everything, and I've kind of run out of decent non-schools to do, at least that I had on my list. Anything I have left to do is just a repeat of what I've already seen like 18 other times. I'm only going to do one more, and I'm going to make it this big middle school. And so I ended the Gary trip over at Alfred Beckman Middle School, which was really gutted and stripped and destroyed. So it wasn't really a good capper for a trip like that, but it was kind of a surreal feeling walking through that building and being like, this is the last one. After this, the channel is pretty much covered for like 4 or 5 months. I don't have to do anything for a while. Like, I came here and I did what I said I was gonna do, and I got it done. And it was like a really like, it had so many mixed emotions with the place I was in life there. I don't ever want to be back in that place in life again, although we'll get to that later in this podcast. But for that to be over and me walking through that school like, this is the last one, I got it, I did it. It was a really unique feeling. And so it was about maybe noon-ish by then. I drove home, got home later that night, and I didn't do anything for the channel for months. I didn't film anything. I didn't even think about going to abandoned places for a while. Between what my headspace was at the time I did Gary, between having my best friend just abandon me and give up on me, and just have very little direction in life, being and working a job I didn't like, just not feeling like I had a lot of friends or anyone to really turn to, just overall not having fun in life. I really wish I could tell you that taking time off from Gary kind of like fixed everything. I wish I could tell you that by the time the last Gary video got posted all those months later, that I was like happy and fixed and better. But honestly, nothing really changed. I was hoping time would change things, but it didn't really. It just kind of numbed me to it. That's all it was. I was numb. I was like, well, this thing, it doesn't really hurt me anymore, but it's like still lingering. Like I'm not a happy person with where I am, but at least I did this crazy Gary thing, and now I know that I can do that again if I need to. So by the time the last Gary video got posted all those months later, I just was like, you know what? That method worked so well and was so efficient. Why don't I just go do that again? But I didn't really have any hyper-specific place I was going to go. Gary was hyper-specific because I knew it was all right there all at once. It was going to be easy. I wanted something a little bit more like unique than that. So I suddenly started thinking, what a cool concept it would be if I just filmed a bunch of abandoned places like near the ocean or something crazy like that. And lo and behold, by some crazy coincidence, the very first place I looked on Google Maps, just out of boredom, just to look somewhere, not even expecting to find anything, was down in like southeast Texas. And all of a sudden I started finding stuff. I found places all over like Port Arthur and Beaumont and everything. So I was like, whatever, they're there, let's go. And so the Texas trip was born. Now Texas, down there into Texas was the farthest I've ever driven for an abandoned place trip. That's the farthest I've ever driven, like just myself, period. I know I drove straight down there the first day. I stopped in Springfield just to say hi to a couple friends, you know, a couple of them that I was still on like decent terms with, of course. But other than that little stop, all that was one day of driving. That was like 13 hours. It was like 10 or 13 hours, something crazy to get down there. Let me tell you, the Texas trip actually could have been a massive flop. I was really worried the Texas trip was going to be a massive flop, because I didn't have nearly as many places to try as Gary, because obviously Gary has hundreds of them. Texas trip, I had maybe like 25-ish on a list, and if we're if we're at a place that's not like Gary where everything's easy and accessible, maybe only half of those might work. So I'm thinking like, man, there's a real chance I go all the way down there and only wind up with like 5 or 6 videos. Like there was a chance for Texas to be a massive flop, but I must have caught that region at a good time because all those places were, all the good ones that I really wanted to do were open. Like I hit some really amazing, cool places on that Texas trip. And like I said, I was in this mental state where I was kind of numb to it. I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know what the future held. And that kind of manifested in one of those like candid conversation moments when I got up under the roof of the Beaumont Hotel. I was like, I just started talking to the thin air and letting the camera roll, and just so I could put it in the video like, guys, I really don't know if this is sustainable, what I'm doing right now, but I may just keep this up. That's kind of the gist of what I said. But yeah, we had that hotel, we had another hotel, there was a hospital with a ton left in it. There was a church or two, there was a couple really good churches I did, especially the Capper. I remember the first day in Texas, I filmed 7 videos in a day, and that 7th one is another one of those kind of lesser known gems on my channel. I wish more people saw that one. I wish that one had more views, but it's this crazy building that I didn't even know what it was. It turned out to be a hospital, but I got in through like some roof. I climbed the roof and got in through a courtyard. I didn't even know if I'd be able to get out of there. It's insane how wrong that video could have gone. But I got in there not even knowing what the building was. Turned out it was a hospital, and that place was just the most like insane thing I've ever seen. Like, I've seen plenty of places that were just completely decayed and decrepit inside. This place was just a new level of it. It was insane in there. Like, there was nothing inherently unique about it compared to other places, but just the decay and condition in there just blindsided me. So I came out of that place. Luckily, I found a door that could open. That kind of saved me. But I came out of that place, and that was my 7th video, and I was like, you know what? We're done for today. That was a bit much. And I staggered. I love telling the story. I staggered into like an IHOP, wearing like all black, with my clothes like coated in like white building debris. I probably looked gross and disgusting, but I staggered into an IHOP just all by myself, and I enjoyed a nice little pancake dinner. The staff was so nice to me, but I feel like they thought I was an absolute psychopath for just coming in all by myself, caked in debris like that, just to eat some pancakes. But yeah, I was 7 videos deep in the Texas trip, and I knew I had some good options left for the next day. So the next day I filmed like 3 more that morning, and then I finished off with that giant church. That, right at this point, to this day, is my 2nd most viewed video ever. That church was insane. Perfect capper for the trip. There was maybe another place or two I could have hit, but that was my 11th one, and I was like, there's no way any place could be better than that right now. I'm gonna end right there. So my Texas trip really only lasted like a day and a half, but I got 11 videos in that time, and it wasn't a flop at all. It was a really good tour. And I remember the final few hours of that day was just nothing but free time. I drove all the way to the ocean. The ocean was like 40 minutes out of my way, but I drove there anyway just to say I did it, that I went to the ocean on that trip. I sat there on like the dirt beach for a little bit, just kind of reminiscing on everything that had got me to that point. That night I went bowling. I spent like 3 hours at this bowling alley. This is such a funny story. I went to this bowling alley, and this just group of dudes invited me onto their lanes because they had like their own equipment. I had my own equipment, so we knew we were both bowlers. They just invited me onto their lane so I could try to like go one-on-one against them for like little $1 or $5 prizes. And I still feel bad about this to this day because like I'm like an actual like crazy bowler. Like I would be considered like a semi-professional, and all these guys are just like basic like bowlers. And so like it felt like I was just getting free money. I felt bad, but they just insisted. So eventually their group got up to like 10 people on like 2 or 3 lanes. It was insane. And the funniest thing is, I don't mean to make this like a race thing in a bad way, I was the only white dude there. I was the only white dude in that group. So yeah, that was Texas. Texas was like, compared to Gary, Texas was like a weird kind of breath of fresh air. But that wouldn't last long. Louisville trip. Oh boy, Louisville trip. Compared to the Gary trip, like I said, Texas felt like, it felt peaceful. I felt kind of peaceful in Texas. Kind of like that peaceful, like you've been through a lot, but it's in your past, so you don't know what's in the future. Maybe things are looking up, I don't know. Louisville came and kind of smashed that. I'm not even gonna lie. Louisville will be the complete opposite of peaceful. So again, going back to the headspace I was at this time period, like I said earlier, I got a little ahead in the story regarding when me and Emma finally spoke again, between all like the pettiness and the ghosting and stuff. In my headspace between Texas and Louisville, after Texas, there was a part of me that was gonna like actually try to like get the duo back together. Like time had gone by at that point. Like we had at least spoken over text, albeit it should have been in person. I was gonna like suddenly lighten up and be like, see if we want to get it back. Like I was gonna, even though I knew she wasn't gonna put any effort into like rectifying the past, I was gonna like try to make up for that and put in even more effort, even though I shouldn't have. She didn't deserve any more effort from me. I was pretty close to like going to her and seeing if she wanted to like really actually rectify and go explore again and see if we wanted to like have a duo round 2-0 or whatever, just to film like maybe another stretch at 10 or whatever. But I didn't. I knew even if we did have what we had again, it would end the exact same way. Let's be real, it would end the exact same way. And it'd be just another big repeat. So it was off to Louisville. Honestly, I don't know why I chose Louisville. In my time exploring, I've either had extremely specific reasons for choosing where I go or no reason at all. And Louisville was honestly no reason at all. It was just like, all right, Louisville's a big city. It's probably got some abandoned places. So let's just do it. Let's just send it. But I knew Louisville was going to be a hard tour. I told you Texas had the chance to be a major flop. Louisville had that same chance. I had a decent sized list in Louisville. I think I had like 25 to 30 jotted down, but I could tell just by eyeballing my list, a lot of those places were the type of places that could have been like undoable. You can tell based off your Google Maps list what stuff may or may not be accessible. Louisville was almost exclusively like these fringe places that maybe it'll be possible, maybe not, probably not for most of them. So I'm like, all right, if we could just dig like 10 or 12 out of Louisville, I'll be happy with that. And what ended up happening was exactly that. Louisville made me work harder to get videos in than any other place I'd ever gone on a tour. And I'm serious about that. I worked harder to get in those 10 videos on that Louisville trip than I did to get those 19 on the Gary trip. I'm serious. Those 10 Louisville ones were hard to get. I'm telling you, half of those Louisville locations I did, at least like 3 or 4 of them, almost half the whole trip, was places that were like even half active. Like some of those didn't even feel like abandoned places, and some of them clearly weren't like fully there yet. So it was an insane run in Louisville. Obviously some notable ones of that were like, the very first one I did was a crazy hotel that was locked up even from inside, so I couldn't get anywhere. And then I injured like my ankle just jumping off the roof, because that's how I had to get in the first place. Then there was like the third one that I did. It was like this crazy like waste incinerator place that was on like an active like site. Then right after that I did an abandoned, not like abandoned, but a semi-abandoned church that literally had people in certain rooms of it somehow, even though the rest of it looked all run down. It was wild. Very next one after those was like a freaking warehouse that had vehicles in it, like somewhat fresh looking vehicles. It had a bunch of pallets full of goods and everything. Like someone was using that warehouse too. It was just insane, the places I was getting into in Louisville that I had no business getting into. And then obviously number 7, Louisville number 7, the big abandoned like government office place. Oh boy, that one. I remember driving around that place the night before just to scope it out and seeing those flashy blue cameras around it and knowing that it was a bad idea. But I kind of needed that one because that was like one of those big focal point kind of places that each tour has. Like there's always one that I'm like, you gotta get that one. You gotta make that one happen. So I woke up at like 4 a.m. the next morning to try to negate the cameras seeing me. Got in, had scrappers cutting open an AC vent right next to me. And then obviously I went through and did that video, and then as I'm trying to escape, the crazy angry guard stops me. I mean, that video, if Wichita video didn't exist, that would be like the best video on the channel. That'd be the most crazy one. And then I remember the 10th and final Louisville video. That's kind of like me conceding defeat. Like, all right, this is the 10th one. There's no way I'm going to be able to make anything else work here. And I don't even want to try. So the 10th one is at that random warehouse in the woods. And that's kind of another one of those candid talk kind of videos in that one. I just kind of start recapping everything that I've just been through in the past like 6 or 7 months leading up to that point. And then that's where the Louisville trip ended. The Louisville trip was like a 3-day event, and I only filmed like 2 videos the first night and then 4 videos the next day and then 4 on the third day. So like that's like what I was saying, that Louisville was a hard trip. Louisville did something to me. I don't know what, but physically it did something to me. Like I remember my chest was hurting for weeks after. Like I'd reach across myself in the wrong kind of way, and I would just have weird stabbing pains in my chest. I don't know what I did, but Louisville just beat me up somehow. Because of all that, I was in the mindset of I don't really want to tour now. Like I only got 10 out of Louisville, so I don't have that much time off. And I didn't use that time very well, because by the time the last Louisville video was posted, I kind of didn't have anything to do. I didn't have anything scheduled. So I kind of just committed to going around rural Kansas, where I could just kind of stay at home and kind of go out vicariously week to week for the first time in like 2 years to film. Remember I filmed a video at that school to start off. That's how I kind of advertised it. TikTok, that whole video is like a big TikTok advertisement. I went to a pair of nursing homes to fill weeks after that. I went to like a roadside factory, and it's about this time that I brought in my work pal Caleb onto the channel, and his roommate he was living with at the time, Keithan. And I'm going to be honest, the 3 of us did some crazy stuff for really only going out like 4, 5, 6 times. I was in the mindset ever since the duo ended that I was better off alone. But in this little run in Kansas, I finally just kind of said, you know what, let me take some friends with me again. I'm sure what happened last time won't happen again, because it's not like it's a friend group. It's just me and a couple dudes from work. And that's exactly what it was, just the 3 of us going out and doing like some fun stuff. I don't like exploring in groups because I feel like safety in lack of numbers gets you caught way less, so I feel really confident when I'm just by myself. The stuff we were doing felt safe enough until, it wasn't. The very first night we ever went out to explore was a video that I still have never posted and will probably never see the light of day, but we snuck into somewhere that had every single red flag you could have ever imagined, yet for some unknown reason we did not turn back. And we're about 100% sure we may have accidentally snuck into like a house. Like the building itself wasn't a house, but once we got in there we realized it was like a house. And I'm not talking about like a homeless, so there's spoilers on that. I don't know if that footage will ever see the light of day, but yeah, there was that. That was the first experience the 3 of us ever had. And because I wasn't going to post that, I realized that the channel still needs a video for the week. So the very next night after that, on like a Friday night right before I had to post, we went out again and filmed Prison Farm video. And then we filmed like a pair of hospitals in Kansas. We just go out like every week on like a Tuesday when we were all off. And then disaster struck again. We went out to do it on a night. We were going to try to film like 3 or 4 in that night just to be efficient with it. The very first place we pulled up to was a nursing home. Neighbors saw us go in, called cops on us, and boom, that was the second bout, or almost bout, with some legal trouble. Obviously that was the video I ended up putting off that I kind of reverse clickbaited, just titled, "Just an Average Night of Exploring" or something like that. I posted that like a year after that happened, but that was part of like the Kansas swing then. Once again, after that, I was plunged into the mindset of, oh my God, the channel's over, it's done. We didn't get arrested that night, but we were given like court date kind of paperwork. So I was like, oh no, this is all happening again, it's over. But we got insanely lucky. I had to take a month off again. That was the first break I had since the duo ending between Gary hiatus. I'd filmed like almost 50 videos consecutively, and then I finally had to take time off because I was afraid I was in legal trouble again. But we got insanely lucky. We never got any actual mail confirming that court date, so what ended up happening was they just tossed it out. They decided it wasn't worth it. So we drove down there for nothing, but boy were we glad that it was nothing. So suddenly we were back again. So I already knew what I was going to do next. I was going to go take a massive tour in Alabama. So just to set up for that is like just to cover a week on the channel, just to say that legal trouble fixed itself and I'm back. Me, Caleb, Keithan went out and filmed one last video out in Kansas at some random school. They couldn't really get into it, but I could, so it's kind of a haphazard video, but it just kind of served as filler, as a way for me to say, yo, I'm back and I'm about to be in Alabama. And you people have no idea the roller coaster I was on heading into Alabama trip. So I was just off thinking the channel was done again. I was just thinking that we had more legal trouble coming that was going to sideline me forever this time, because there's no diversion for a second time. But suddenly that all just went away into nothing. So I was back able to film again, and I was like, all right, Alabama was going to happen regardless of what the outcome of that legal thing was. Even if I picked up some sort of charge, I was going to do the Alabama trip, only it was going to be like the swan song, the final trip of the channel. Like, I was going to risk fate regardless in Alabama. But turned out I was all right. So Alabama just became like another tour, only it was definitely not like any other tour. Alabama was the biggest roller coaster tour I ever took. I cannot think of anything that compares. Now, Alabama has a real juicy, toxic origin story. Obviously, Gary and Texas and Louisville were me fresh off of just being like completely abandoned by my best friend of the duo era. So I was like, that ruined my joy of the channel for a while. But Alabama trip, I wanted to actually take some of that old pain and really channel it into that trip. Me and the dude who was most instrumental in me and her's friendship getting destroyed were at one point gonna do that Alabama type of trip together, at least into Birmingham or Montgomery. But that, obviously that was a year ago, and he was out of my life for good at that point. So I took the blueprint for that trip and I'm like, I'm gonna do that all by myself. I'm gonna make it Alabama for that exact reason. I'm going to take all that pain I used to have, I'm going to turn into anger and motivation. We're going to go to Alabama and we're going to do it just like we've been doing it, all by myself, no help. And I was going to consider that Alabama trip, whether or not anyone ever knew why I was doing it, whether or not he ever even saw a single video or even knew that I did it, just in my own head, going to Alabama and doing that trip was the biggest middle finger to him I could come up with in like a really creative way. So that's why it was Alabama specifically. Also, he's from Alabama. So I took the initial plan of doing just like Birmingham, and I'm like, that's not enough. We gotta go big on this one. We're gonna take the whole state with me. I'm not just hitting Birmingham, I'm gonna hit everywhere. Obviously, in retrospect, that didn't end up happening. The Alabama tour was more of just like the northern third of Alabama tour, but we'll get to that in a minute. I opened up with a bang at that crazy like office nitrate plant kind of place where I had a worker follow me out. That was cool. That was a good opener. Filmed a couple more. I spent the night in Huntsville, and then next day is when it all went down. The very first video on day 2 of Alabama, which was the first full day. The first day was just a half day with driving. The second day is when I have that famous video of me getting caught at that hospital, that half abandoned on one side, half active on the other, janky, weird hospital, where the owners saw me from the active half and called cops on me, and I was this close. I was at their mercy. I could have picked up a felony charge, but luckily they were really kind and they let me off. But that was really demoralizing. That was a demoralizing thing to happen that early in a trip, knowing you have so much left to go, and suddenly you have that happen where like you got away with murder, but you're like, wow, this is not good. Like, that could have been so bad. And so that's kind of what went into that next video after. That's another one of those candid talk videos. It's the type of video I put out, not for the abandoned place, but for the talk I want to have in the video that takes place in an abandoned place, just because that's the channel exploring. And that's basically the video where I sit down and say, yo, this thing I'm doing here, it's just not sustainable. Like, disaster is gonna strike someday. Because you had no clue the roller coaster I was on between just a month ago almost getting arrested, and then just then an hour ago almost getting arrested. Like, it was insane, the roller coaster I was on for this channel at that time. Somehow we're still here going though. But lo and behold, I pulled myself together and ended up filming like 4 more that day, just kind of town hopping all the way down to Birmingham. I pulled into Birmingham that night, and I woke up that next morning bright and early, and I went on a heater like you've never imagined. Think of like all that anger I was trying to channel into this tour, like I was telling you about, coupled with the fact that I was on this crazy roller coaster where I keep almost getting into trouble, barely avoiding it. I think that day in Birmingham, I like to imagine, was just me just taking all my anger out on the city of Birmingham. I broke my record there. I filmed 10 videos that day. I hit my stride, and even though a lot of those videos were kind of hastily filmed, they're really short. I was kind of going for like speed rather than quality. That day was insane. That was just me absolutely just on one that day. And then again on the 10th one, there's another like candid moment where I'm chilling up on the top of that crazy tower and I'm like, yo, this is wild. How did we get here? How did it get to this point? So yeah, I took it out on Birmingham that day and a little bit the next day. I filmed 3 more that next morning before I drove to Montgomery. Birmingham was like the trip within the trip on Alabama. We hit 13 in Birmingham out of the 24 in total, and still to this day, that's like the most crazy efficient I've ever been, doing 13 in just a day and a half like that. By the end of that night, after the next day, after I filmed 3 more that morning in Birmingham, I was in Montgomery, and disaster was gonna strike again. I drove right to that hotel that I did, and that video is a pretty cool video. It's kind of intense. I really like that one. And then I was gonna go to bed that night. I'd just been to Golden Corral. I wanted to celebrate by going to Golden Corral. So I did that, and then I went back to my hotel. I had my pajamas on and everything, and I was gonna just go to bed and rest up for the next day. But then I realized, you know, I only filmed 4 videos a day. I should be able to get 1 more in. So I rolled out of bed with my pajama bottoms still on, and I went to this old nursing home, which when I pulled up had lights on and everything. I was like, all right, this is gonna be a dud, but I'm gonna walk around anyway. Only to find an open door. And I'm like, all right, this is too good to be true. So I walked out and waited, and sure enough, boom, cop pulls up. So I ran for my life back to the gas station I parked at and realized that this roller coaster is getting too insane. That's like the 3rd time in the past month that I've tempted fate with cops. And so I'm like, all right, this tour needs to end. So the next day in Montgomery, I was gonna try to film maybe a couple more. And weird coincidental things just kept happening. I'd go to a place and there'd be a cop sitting right next to it. I tried this other place and there was this weird unmarked car. It was just a regular person, but he kept driving by the place I wanted to go. He kept driving by me. He'd pull up to me, then he'd turn around and drive back. And I'm like, this is just too sketchy. This entire trip has been insane. I need to end it. So I just need one more relatively safe place. So I did those hotels that were like crawling with squatters. At least they were only squatters, not cops. And then that's where Alabama trip ended. Ah, man, Montgomery Mall. I remember the proper people, like the biggest Urbex channel, posted Montgomery Mall days after I finished that Alabama trip. And that was just like my facepalm moment, like, I was right there in Montgomery. If I hadn't been so close to trouble so many times, I would have just done that mall. But I didn't. And that's like one of my biggest touring regrets still to this day, that I was right there in Montgomery, but I didn't get a chance to do that mall. Anyway, Alabama trip was my biggest tour ever at that point, so 24 videos had me set for a while. I didn't have to do anything for the channel, so we got a flash forward to March of 2024. And by this point, the channel had ballooned up a bit. The Wichita video was getting bigger. We were up to like 4,000 subscribers at this point. And Alabama trip had given me like 5 months off. And I just needed something to do. Like, I just needed another tour. Like, Illinois trip was what came next, and honestly, it's like the first trip that just never really had a deeper meaning to me. Like, I described all those others as like having deeper meanings. Illinois trip was just kind of a filler time thing, but it was filler done right, because there's a lot of good videos in that Illinois run. Like, it was just for the sake of convenience. Like, Illinois, it's not too far away from where I live. It's got a lot of abandoned places just statewide, so I knew I could find plenty of them. I just kind of focused on a few bigger cities like Springfield and Decatur and Peoria type of stuff. Just kind of town hopped around in that general area, and that was a really good tour overall. Nothing on Illinois trip ever got too crazy big as far as views go, but I think all around it's one of my better tours. Obviously 16 more videos there gave me another little bit of a break, so now we skip ahead and we get to the St. Louis tour, the original one. Now this tour was for the sake of conveniency because I was bowling in a tournament that was taking place in St. Louis. So I'm like, you know what? Why don't I just stay an extra day and make a tour out of it just for convenience's sake? I have a very stubborn habit of never going back to initial plans after I go for a backup plan or a plan C. But I guess one of the takeaways for St. Louis was that was the first time I ever went and did something that I hadn't done before, even though I'd wanted to before. If that makes sense. I wanted to do some St. Louis during Duo era, but when that had to get canceled, I lost interest in St. Louis. But for the sake of conveniency, I was like, all right, I'm in St. Louis, time to do St. Louis. I guess one of the biggest takeaways for the St. Louis era was while I was posting these videos, that was when the channel started to like really boom up. Like I'm talking like gain 1,000 subs in just like a couple months. It's because a bunch of like TikTok content farming like thieves had like taken like my Wichita video and gotten like 20 million, gotten themselves like 20 million views on TikTok. They didn't even credit me, but people still found it anyway and were finding my channel because of it. And then big YouTubers, like big viral story channels like Chilling Scares and Dark Matter and several others that had picked up the Wichita one. At least they actually credited me. So a whole lot of channel traction was happening during the St. Louis era. So this is where I'm starting to get like actually decent views on like every video I put out. And then randomly, as I'm working these abandoned place videos around this bowling tournament, one of those videos I ended up filming at this insane, fresh, untouched, recently left nursing home just suddenly blew up overnight. I mean, literally, like, I woke up the next morning and the thing had like 22K views. I'd never had a video blow up that big just overnight. And then the funny thing is it just stopped. It's only gained like 1,000 more since, but suddenly that thing just ballooned up to my third most viewed video ever and then just kind of stopped there. But yeah, St. Louis tour #1 had a couple other like bucket list items. It had Cement Land, it had Cleveland High School, so overall another 10 video tour. I remember it was very frustrating way to end it though. I'm not gonna lie. I don't like the way the St. Louis tour 1 ended. I didn't have a very big list of stuff. St. Louis has a million things, but I didn't have that much time to really list a lot down because I was just there for a bowling trip. So I was trying to prioritize good places, but in the end I just kind of had to settle because I kept driving to duds over and over again. I was like crashing out in my car from driving all the way across St. Louis like 2 different ways just to go to duds. So I ended up just kind of having to end it on like a throwaway place, but still, it ended up being a weird, cool video because I almost fell through some floors a bunch of times. So yeah, again, with the posting of the St. Louis videos, I knew I was going to be in another bowling tournament in like October down in Cincinnati. So I knew I was going to be doing a tour there too, just again for convenience's sake because I'm already going to be there for bowling. But I needed like a little something to fill time in between. So I hit up my sister's friend Victoria, who I had like a little bit of a crush on then, and because she was in Topeka for her college, and I kind of manipulated it to where I made it look like it wasn't my idea. So I kind of hit her up and I was like, you know, you're pretty lucky staying in Topeka right now. There's a lot of abandoned places there. Like, kind of the way I go about trying to get someone else to ask me what I already want to ask them. But eventually, yeah, that did make its way to being a roundabout way of us going out to actually go to some abandoned places. So it was the dead of summer at that point, so it was like crazy hot, but we went out and we filmed a couple. One of them was that crazy, insane like hotel place. That was sick. I can't believe we got into that, but it turned out to be great. This kind of weird little Topeka swing happens around the Cincinnati tour, so it's like 2 videos here, Cincinnati tour, and then 2 videos there. So I'll just cover all 4 of the Topeka videos right now. But the second time we filmed, we kind of hit the last of our variable options we had in Topeka. I mean, Topeka's got a lot, but some of it just wasn't open back then. I know I had to work really hard to make that last nursing home work. I climbed to the roof and found her way in. That's the way it went. That was like the last thing we could really do in Topeka. I don't know, we never actually got together or anything. We were never a couple or anything. I kind of like just stayed back and let us be like friends the way we were, just to kind of read the situation. And I read into it enough to tell she wasn't really into me at that time, so we kind of stopped. We were gonna do maybe some KC videos, but those never really happened. I don't know, we're cool. You might see her again in some videos someday. But then obviously, yeah, then we get to the Cincinnati tour, again, happening around a bowling event. And honestly, the closest thing I compare Cincinnati to would be Louisville. Cincinnati was another tour that really tested me in terms of how to get stuff, because I didn't have a crazy big list, and a lot of what I did have was duds, but I still got, I think, 10 or 11. It was 10. Cincinnati was another 10 video tour. That's like my bare minimum for a good tour, getting 10. But my biggest takeaway for Cincinnati was that was the first tour that I ever drove away from having completed, just feeling really disappointed. Usually when I complete a tour, it's like this euphoric feeling of, wow, you did it, you just did something real big, that was crazy. Cincinnati, I just felt disappointed because Cincinnati, Ohio has 2 huge abandoned malls in it, and I wanted to do them so bad. They were like those focal point places I was talking about, and neither one worked. They were both locked up like Fort Knox while I was there, and it was just so disappointing. Even though I did get into some other really cool, good places during that Cincinnati run, just leaving there without either one of those malls just felt like I was missing something. I don't know. Looking back on it, overall, the Cincinnati run was a pretty good one. There were some good videos in that run, but it just felt like it was missing something without those malls. The next major tour I did after that came kind of a while later. I did the Cincinnati tour in October, and then Jackson tour comes in January of this year, 2025. But in between the final Cincinnati videos and Jackson videos, I again needed to fill some weeks. So me and Victoria were thinking about doing KC, but then that didn't happen, so I ended up having to film a couple KC videos by myself, or at least one of them was by myself. I was acting really goofy at that school at like 2 a.m. I brought a meal with me, I shot hoops in the gym. That whole video was just like a party, like, ooh, I'm in KC again for the first time in 3 years. And then me and, again, Caleb was back again, and this time we brought Griffin and Kiara, and then we went to this crazy, like, hospital place where we got sketched out because there was probably someone on the 3rd floor. And then it was off to Jackson, Mississippi for that trip. Again, Jackson, another one of those tours that doesn't have that much of a deeper meaning. I went south on purpose because I wanted to get a little bit warmer weather than the 10 degrees it was at home. But still, Jackson, Mississippi was my most physically uncomfortable tour I've ever taken. The whole time there, it was either raining or 40, 30, 20 degrees. I was so miserable there physically. If you would have taken the physical conditions of Jackson trip, combined it with my mental state of Gary trip, that would have been the most traumatic trip I've ever taken. But luckily, I was really locked in mentally for Jackson trip, and the channel was big enough at that point. We were getting close to 10K subs when I did Jackson trip. We were at like 8 or 9K. I was locked in enough to where I was really focused on trying to film good places. The Jackson trip is a 12 video long run, but when I was there, I could have made it like 14. Like there are 2 videos that I have like full length explore footage of that I chose not to post just because I didn't think the place was interesting enough to warrant a video. Because at that point I was really locked in to trying to make the channel be about good quality places. Just filming places that I know people would really want to watch, you know? And I think I did well with that. Obviously there's a couple videos in there that are kind of like filler, but otherwise there are some really good ones in the Jackson trip. Obviously there's schools that were left only a few years ago. There's a couple ones that are probably relatively untouched, and of course we end with the massive mall. Finally got an abandoned mall. That kind of made up for the Cincinnati failures, but oh my god, to end that trip on that mall, it just felt like we were on an upswing. Like it felt like we were headed in the right direction with the channel and everything. Once again, after that mall, I was motivated, I was everything. I think if you just take a look at all the trips I've ever taken, Jackson's gotta be up there as one of the best, just quality, good videos and good quality places. I think the Jackson trip overall is one of my best tours. And having that mall cap it off was just, chef's kiss. But then we have to jump to April of this year, 2025. And my life just completely changed all over again. So I just posted the last of my Jackson videos, but I didn't have time to film any more. I didn't have a time to film another tour again. Everything about my life had changed. Initially, I had a lot of big plans for the summer. I was gonna go north. I know I was gonna go north. I was gonna go to like Minnesota or Wisconsin or something. But suddenly I got a new promotion at work. It was kind of like a spur of the moment thing that I just suddenly decided I was down for because they needed someone to fill a spot. But I promoted up at work, and so it wouldn't have been very professional of me to just suddenly request a big bunch of time off while they're trying to train me. So I couldn't immediately go on a tour. So I'm like, all right, I've been putting it off for years, but it's time to finally just buck up and just finally film around my own hometown of KC again. I'd been saving it for like a good occasion, but now I was kind of just using it as like, all right, I kind of am stuck at home, so I got nothing else to do because I'm on this amazing streak of uploading videos ever since the Alabama tour back in 2023. I hadn't taken a single break. 2024 was the first year I ever went an entire calendar year every week having a video, so I was on this insane run. And I needed to keep it going, and KC was the only way I was going to. Now, Aaliyah was someone that I just seen around work for the past couple years. She was, I'll admit, like my work crush for a while, but obviously like nothing ever outside of work. Like we just were pals at work and that was it. We never really saw each other. I had her snap, and randomly one night she snapped me a picture of like this shirt she had. And that kind of sparked a random conversation regarding what I was doing that night. I think I mentioned I was going out to film a video, and that ended up being the first KC 2025 tour hospital video. But once again, I did that thing where I wanted to bring it up, but I didn't want it to fully look like my idea. So when we kind of started chatting, she mentioned something about how I should be careful, it could be dangerous out there. And I said, yeah, should I bring some help? Should I bring some muscle? And she said, yeah. So I was like, well, Caleb and my other pals are either at work or sleeping right now, so unless you're asking to go. And that turned into segueing into we should go sometime. So she seemed down for that. She seemed really excited. So I went and I filmed that hospital. It went off without a hitch. I teamed up with the other YouTuber, City Lurks, when they were in town. The first time I teamed up with another YouTube channel in like 3 or 4 years. We went and did that school, and then sure enough, it was time for me and Aaliyah to go do our video. I scouted out all these Kansas City places. Again, something I never do until now. I went to a bunch of places, not with the intention of actually going in, but to just check on them to see if they're accessible or safe for the two of us to go to. And then eventually the day came. I was bowling a tournament, but we had time to do it that evening, so I drove like 90 miles an hour over from Lawrence, Kansas, over to her apartment to pick her up. And we went out, and I showed her some of the options that we had, and she seemed down to do this. She seemed excited to do this one church, so that's the one we went and filmed. And that day went really nice. It was really kind of awkward because it was like the first time we'd ever hung out outside of work. And I never really addressed the elephant in the room as to what it even was. Was it a date? Was it just us hanging out? But I just kind of let the time be the time. I just let us have our fun the way it was without making it weird or anything. I just wanted to kind of like observe and see how the interaction goes, you know? And then eventually there was a point in that one video where I was like, so how's your first abandoned place video? Like, how is this going for you? And because, like I said, it was really awkward. It was hard to read even how she was feeling, if she was like enjoying it or if she like didn't want to be there. But then there was like that candid moment on camera where she said she was having a lot of fun, and so I did like a silly laugh, and like it was a really nice moment to know like she was like having fun with it too, because I couldn't really tell until then. And then obviously we decided we wanted to go and do it again sometime. We planned it out. We found a time where we were both going to be off work the same day. And I remember I went in just as a customer to go buy some stuff the day before we went off for our second one. And I dropped by her little area of work to say hi. And I remember like the look in her eye. You know when you just see the look in someone's eye, like they're really genuinely happy to see you and like suddenly like you mean something to them? She had that look, and that just made me feel like so special. I could tell she was really excited to go out and go again, and so was I. And so we filmed the next day that school up in Kansas City. Maybe this is recency bias, but at least right after we filmed it, that was like my favorite video. That was one of my favorite, just most special favorite times I've had to film a video. Not even just that video, but that day in general. After we filmed that one, like, we always went out to get food after we filmed. Our first video, we stopped at Sonic before I dropped her off. That day we went straight downtown. We went to eat at like Johnny's Tavern. It was like It was again one of those things where it wasn't ever talked about or mentioned what it was, but it was like in every way, shape, and form looked exactly like a date. So it was like a really special day there. Oh, I could talk so much about how fun that video was to film, but we've been podcasting for so long here. That was just like the best day I'd had in so long. Also, that was the video that we coined the phrase like the Jared and Aaliyah show. And that was kind of like where we kind of decided that, all right, we're going to team up and do Kansas City. It's going to be great. So we would talk about traveling. We'd talk about going out of state. We'd talk about going to all these crazy cities, like the stuff I've been doing for years. Like, we kind of made like all these plans that almost came up as like a joke, but we were like so like down to actually do them, and we were so excited. Like, we were gonna like do it all. I talked about like having her come down to Springfield with me just to visit and like say what's up to like some of the original friends I've made down there. And I remember the day I posted that second video we did the school, and she sent me like a snap. It was like the most adorable thing. She was like jumping up and down in like her little pajamas because she was so excited about the video being posted, and she liked the way it was turning out. Finally, it was time for round 3, like a week or so later. I'd been saving KC for a special time for so long, and like suddenly I just accidentally did myself into it with this promotion, and me and her being on like the same level of work now, being able to hang out, and suddenly her just being down for everything. Like, it was insane the coincidences that went into this. Suddenly it was time for our third one, and we went to like this other church, like this seminary type place, and that's the one where you like hung out with the cat the whole time. There was this moment where we sat in like the pew with the cat for like 20 straight minutes. I really wanted to like talk to her, like, and start to ask like, what really is this? Are we like, do we like each other? Or are we counting these as dates? Like, what is this? But I never did, because I didn't want to like ruin the moment with the cat or make it weird or anything, just in case it wasn't what I hoped it was. And then after that, we went over to Crown Center, this poppin' area of KC, although it wasn't very poppin' that day. Most of the shops around there were closed. It was actually kind of a letdown, but we had so much fun anyway. Went and sat down and got food. We went over to Union Station, even though nothing was really open. We just walked around and saw it all, and just, again, that day probably would have been like the second best day I've had in so long. Just second only to the second video we filmed, and then when we went to downtown KC. I don't know. The only thing that could have made it better if more of those shops in Crown Center were open. I remember after that, after I dropped her off at home, we texted each other later on, and she said something along the lines of, she said, "I'm so happy I met you. I think you're a beautiful soul." Something like that. And then we planned our fourth video after. It kind of came at a bad time because she was fresh off like dental surgery, but we went and did it anyway, and it turned out to be those crazy apartments. After our third video, after that third time we hung out, the word date did finally get used. I think she said rather jokingly at the end, "Thanks for another date." And so I asked, "Do we count these as dates?" And we both agreed that we didn't really know, but we were just having fun anyway, so I didn't think anything of it. But the fourth one around, I finally started jokingly like calling it a date just to see how she'd react, and she kept going with it, so I was like, all right, this is good. And after we got back to her apartment, there was like just this moment, because I had to help her lift up a big heavy chair up onto her like balcony area. There was this moment we were just chilling on the balcony, and I finally just decided to pop the question like, "Are you interested in me? Like, do you have feelings for me?" I got probably the second best answer I could have gotten, which was she did. She said she did like me, but because of her like past experiences with like really toxic and abusive relationships with like these douchebags, like she wasn't looking for a relationship right then and there at that moment. And I don't know how much of her own personal background I should really say publicly, but she was like really fresh off like a 6-year thing, so like I understood. And I didn't want to like rush her into anything. Said, you know what, that's fine. I am perfectly fine with taking things as slow as they need to be, and we should just keep doing what we're doing, and it'll be great. So that was that. The next few days were fine, everything was normal. I kind of backed off a little bit. I didn't want to like seem too pushy with it, but we kept talking and everything. We'd see each other around work. And then everything just stopped. Suddenly everything just went cold. Like, we'd text each other less. We'd make plans to hang out or something, but she just end up like ghosting it, or they just get canceled or something. And I was starting to get like really worried. I'm like, well, what's happening here? Why doesn't she want to hang out with me no more? I was starting to think that, is our KC tour just done now? Is it just over after the fourth one? But eventually we finally found time to film again. And I was right about to be going to Baton Rouge, Louisiana for my bowling nationals. It wasn't going to be anything explore based. I wouldn't have time for it, but I was going to be gone for like a week or almost a week. And we needed a video for that week, and that week I was going to be gone. So that final day we got to go out and go. We decided to make it like a twofer. We filmed 2 of them in one day. But I just remember that day we went out to film just wasn't like the other days. It just wasn't. Mentally, it just looked like she wasn't there. She said she was like having fun and enjoying it, but I could tell it was the type of thing that someone says because they don't want to hurt your feelings and say, no, I don't really care about this, but that's clearly what was happening. And I was just like seeing all that coldness that I'd seen the past several days. Suddenly up front in person, I was hoping, oh, maybe if we just get together and hang out again, things will be normal again, but it just didn't. I didn't have a lot of fun that day. I remember I was, in the videos I look fine because I've like got like my video version of myself on, just slightly more hyped up and animated. But in my head I was like, man, this is horrible. This just kind of sucks. The final one we did was that crazy untouched church. I remember just walking through this place knowing that this is one of the best abandoned places I've seen in a long time. This is like a top 10, 20 place I've ever seen. But what sucked was I wasn't even enjoying it because I was just like, well, what do I say? Like, why won't she talk to me? Why won't she just tell me what's wrong? Like, what's happening? And then there's a moment in that video that I purposely left in. It doesn't really do anything to add to the video, but I left it in purposely just to allude to the moment. But there's a part where we're about to leave and I'm like, I don't want to leave. Let's just sit in the sanctuary for a little while longer. And so we did. And none of that's on camera, but she was like just kind of walking around there and I was just sitting in the pew, just taking in the atmosphere, but I just kept thinking, this is the last one we're ever going to film. I could just tell that was the last one we were ever going to film. I just knew. I just had a gut feeling that I was never going to be able to convince her to go out and film another one with me again after that, or hang out with me or anything. And right now it looks like that gut feeling turned out to be true. She was just kind of aimlessly pacing around. I was sitting there. All I wanted to do was talk to her, but she didn't really want to talk, it didn't seem like, and I didn't really know what to say anyway. So it just kind of sat in silence for a while. I've been saying in like all the previous KC videos we've done how it felt so good to be back in KC. It felt so good to be doing it like this, like to have someone with me, especially someone that I like really liked, like her, like that. And then in that moment I just knew like, wow, this is that last one, I guess. After I dropped her off that day, everything just continued to be cold. I kept asking her, yo, are we good? What's wrong? But she would just pass it off like everything's fine, even though it clearly wasn't, because again, it's just the type of thing someone's saying to spare your feelings. Literally just within a couple weeks after that, we were just back to being complete strangers who worked under the same roof. We're just 2 strangers who worked in the same building. There was nothing I could say or do that she wouldn't just ghost or ignore. Suddenly it was like she thought I was just this weirdo, just for liking her, even though she had allegedly claimed she'd liked me too at one point. And regardless of any relationship stuff, we were gonna have such a fun summer. We were gonna go to all these KC places. We were gonna maybe travel to wherever we wanted to. Whether or not we ever got to be something that was real or whether or not we just kept it up as we were, it was gonna be such a fun summer. And instead we were just back to 2 people who are just complete strangers. I asked her just to talk to me on 3 different occasions. Only one of them did she act like she was actually gonna talk, but she didn't. And then she just ghosted all the others. And did she ever actually like me? Was she ever actually into me? I'd like to think so, because I'm pretty good at reading people, and I could just see it in her face and the way she interacted with me. There was a little something there, but then suddenly it was just gone without one word. All our plans she just bailed on. Everything was just done just like that without one word as to why. Although knowing her past, I bet you I could make a couple pretty good close guesses. And then I was just thinking, boy, this all seems a little familiar, isn't it? This wouldn't be the first time I've been just completely left for dead by someone that I cared about, someone I went way out of my way just to make them happy. So yeah, I was right back in that old 2022 kind of headspace, only this time, maybe this is just recency bias speaking, but I almost feel like what this was even worse for my headspace than what 2022 was. Because with me and Emma, the threat of dating was never on the table. That was never talked about. That was never really a thing that was going to happen. So it wasn't anything to like lead up to. But this had like actual like genuine feelings involved in it from what I thought on both ends. And then it just was suddenly gone. At least I knew why Emma was mad at me, because we both got screwed out of the duo thing. With this, with Aaliyah, with someone who I actually liked and who actually liked me at one point, it just disappeared. It just disappeared into nothingness. With me being right back into that just horrible headspace of just feeling left for dead with this channel that's had way too much personal life involvement in it. I knew I had to finish off the Kansas City tour. With the 2 I'd filmed before we formed our show and the 6 that we just filmed, I knew I needed like a couple more. And I was looking at my schedule trying to like figure out what I'm gonna do, how am I gonna get out of this. Like, I need to go somewhere and just stockpile some videos so I can get it done with. So I knew I had to finish KC with a couple of them because I didn't have any openings in my schedule yet. So I went to that one insane, crazy rehab place, and you could tell in that video I'm just not there. I did not want to be there. And I remember all the comments were telling me how insane it was that I did that at that place that allegedly had security, that people could get arrested there. And I remember just sitting there like, reading these comments, just not even caring, like, whatever. I just needed a video, so I went and did it. Doesn't matter. And then I went the very next week. I woke up at like 5 a.m. to go do that crazy 7-story hotel because I thought it was going to be a little bit more dangerous than it was, but it ended up being pretty easy. I purposely did a couple places that me and her were never actually going to do because they were going to be too risky, but that was the end of the KC swing because lo and behold, I looked at my schedule and I somehow had a weekend off. Rarely do I ever get 2 days off in a row, but this was one of them, and I was like, okay, I know what needs to be done. And that is the origin story of the St. Louis tour. And that is where this podcast has caught up to the present, people. We are here now in the present. I did the St. Louis tour, and I'm in the process of posting those videos. So I won't go too in depth about what happens on that trip, given that there's still videos that are yet to be posted, but I will tell you this. The St. Louis tour is situationally maybe the biggest thing I've ever done. I didn't want to think about abandoned places again. I didn't want to do anything. But I was on this incredible streak of videos, like I said, going back to 2023. I wanted to just put out a video saying, yo, I can't do this right now. I need a mental health break. I need some time off. This is all just too much for me. Between you having her leave me for dead, being at this job I'm not having fun at, and just everything else, just loneliness, life stuff, everything. Like, I did not want to think about the channel or abandoned places. But if it weren't for this streak, if I took a mental health day, I don't know. If I took time off for mental health, I don't know if I would have come back. Maybe I shouldn't say that, but I'm not sure if that streak ended, if I would have even come back at all. But when I saw those 2 open days, I knew I could go over to St. Louis, bang out another 10, and that would keep it going, and that would pretty much save the channel from suddenly stopping. And that's just kind of why St. Louis is one of the biggest things I've ever done. The difference between Gary and St. Louis is that Gary, I at least had that month to process everything that had just happened. Like, Gary trip is me like kind of broken inside. Like, I was broken in the Gary trip, but I at least had a month off to like process and lead up to it. St. Louis tour just happened. It just happened right in the midst of it. It happened in the midst of me just breaking. Like, if Gary is me broken, St. Louis is me like in the process of breaking. So It's some really unique videos, but man, did I have a lot on my head while I was filming those videos. It doesn't matter now, because St. Louis tour came and saved the channel, and it just bought me time to move along to what I need to do next. So this podcast has caught up to the present. That's basically everything I've done in 6 years on this channel. Everything it meant to me, everything I've been through, everyone I've experienced it with, the good and the bad. I really hope you all have enjoyed, because this thing has gone on for so long. I'm talking about both the channel and the podcast right now, but mostly the podcast. This thing has gone on so long that I don't even know how to end it, but thank you so much to everyone who supported me throughout the years. Thank you to everyone who's absolutely screwed me over and left me for dead, because regardless, you gave me motivation, and sometimes that's all you need. But mostly, obviously, thank you to all the actual supporters. Without you, the videos couldn't happen. Without you, there wouldn't even be anyone to watch them, so I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for 10,000 subscribers. We got there right as the St. Louis videos were coming out, so thank you so much for watching this podcast, if anyone watched it all the way through. And I'd be more than willing to do more podcasts just like this, maybe talking about each and every one of these eras more in depth, because this was the very abridged version, just for the sake of keeping this podcast not like 3 or 4 hours. So if you want more like this, let me know. I could talk for hours about all these crazy things I've done. And thank you so much for watching. J-Co-Urbex out.